Hey guys, welcome to tonight's channel, where the mysteries that once slept in history are awakened by a voice in the dark. Before we begin, I have a small question. Where are you listening from? In bed, in a dimly lit room, or driving through a city that's already asleep? And what time is it now? If it's late, perfect, because the night is when truth loves to appear the most. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because you won't want to miss the stories that could change the way you see an entire era. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a secret, not about kings or wars, but about something so small it was almost forgotten, yet powerful enough to bring the Middle Ages to its knees. A secret hidden in a cold monastery cellar, guarded by fear, and passed down by the light of an oil lamp. Now, turn off a few lights, find yourself a comfortable spot. Close your eyes if you want, because when this story begins, we won't just be listening. We'll see the world that once trembled before knowledge. You wake up in a medieval village, where the fog is so thick it feels like someone poured an entire pot of white porridge over the world. The air smells of firewood, burnt leather, and people who haven't bathed since the last century. It's dense, raw, and so real you feel like you could slice it with a rusted knife. Church bells echo in the distance, long, heavy chimes that sound less like a call to prayer and more like a reminder. Wake up, villagers. It's time to be afraid for another day. You rub your eyes and realize you're lying on a pile of hay in a cowshed, next to a goat that's looking at you with judgmental eyes. A gruff farmer appears, holding a stick. Who are you? Stealing hay? You want to say you're just a time traveler, but you'd rather not be burned alive, so you stammer, I'm just a lost stranger. He nods suspiciously, then tosses you a piece of bread so hard it could break teeth. Eat. You'll need strength to repent. You don't even have time to ask what you're repenting for, before a voice shouts from the street. Whoever skips morning mass, Satan writes their name down. You look up and step outside. The whole village feels like a strange stage play. Women in headscarves clutch rosaries. Old men walk hunched with grim faces, and barefoot children run through the mud. On the wooden wall of a tavern hangs a sign written in black ink. Tuesday, witch hunt. Thursday, sword duel. Sunday, free confession. You've barely finished reading when someone yells, "Make way for the bishop." The crowd parts. A man in a black cloak rides slowly down the road. His face is stern, eyes cold as steel. A heavy cloth bag swings from his saddle. You don't want to know what's in it, but it's definitely not vegetables. You start to wonder where exactly you've landed in history, a time when even glancing the wrong way could earn you a label: heretic. In the corner of the street, a drunk man slumps against a wall, mumbling, "If God says jump, you jump. Leave the thinking to the penguins who can write." You don't get it, but yeah, definitely medieval vibes. An old woman shuffles up to you, squinting hard. "Are you possessed by the devil, child?" You want to say, "Just possessed by Wi-Fi," but you know that'd end with you on a bonfire. Instead, you force a smile. Probably not, ma'am." She studies you for a moment, then sighs. "Your face is too bright. Be careful." And with that, she leaves, while you stand there not sure whether to laugh or panic. The sky brightens. Sunlight cuts through the fog, glowing over straw roofs and creaking wooden carts. The village comes alive with sound roosters crowing, blacksmiths hammering, children crying, and distant hymns weaving together. You step into the square, where a crowd gathers around a wooden platform. A monk stands atop it, holding up a scripture, shouting, "Knowledge is sin. Whoever writes, paints, or reads serves the devil's hand." The crowd erupts in applause, cheering like they just watched a comedy show. You look around, unsure whether to laugh or cry. In your modern head, a voice mutters, "Yeah, pretty sure this guy didn't pass the entrance exam." But you stay silent. In this time, even a sarcastic thought could get you roasted literally. At the edge of the crowd, you notice a man in a grey cloak sitting in the shadows, not shouting, not clapping. He's holding a cup of wine, his eyes calm, like someone who knows something the rest of the world is too afraid to say. He looks up and meets your gaze. In that instant, the noise fades. Just two people, one from the future, and one who seems to have been waiting for you for a very long time. Time slips away. The air feels heavier, dreamlike. The world no longer belongs to history. but to something darker and softer, a fevered dream of smoke and sin. The man lifts his cup slightly, nodding toward the tavern, an invitation. You don't know why, but your feet start moving. Behind you, the crowd keeps shouting, "Burn the ones who can read." And you, the accidental traveller about to walk into a story no one ever dared to tell. In the square, the shouting hasn't stopped. The monk has finished his sermon but still stands there, holding the cross high as if afraid to lose the crowd's attention. The wind sweeps through, carrying dust, ash, and the smell of cheap wine, holy and drunk, all at once. You stand in the corner, not sure whether to be afraid or amused. A fat friar with a red face bellows, "Knowledge is sin." The crowd answers in unison, "Amen." You mutter under your breath, "Yeah, Amen. But the guy who wrote the Bible could read, right?" The old woman beside you turns and glares, her voice gravelly like a millstone. "What did you say, sinner?" You laugh awkwardly, waving your hands. No, just clearing my throat." The crowd roars again, cheering like it's a football match. A shirtless man raises his arms and yells, "Burn the books! Books are the devil's fire!" The square erupts with applause until he trips over a pile of wood and faceplants into the mud. Laughter breaks out, but he quickly jumps up and shouts, "See? The devil tripped me because I spoke the truth." You can't tell if he fell because of demons or stupidity. Beside you, a boy around 10 giggles. He yells like that every morning. By afternoon, he's drinking with the friars, he whispers. People are used to it. You ask, "Aren't they scared?" The boy shrugs. "Sure. But they're more scared of him than the devil." You almost laugh but stop when a group of soldiers in black armor marches by, helmets down, spears gleaming, their silence sharper than any sermon. They surround the wooden platform like guards, protecting the right to remain stupid. The cold wind blows again. Church bells mix with the cries of vendors, braying mules, and a drunk man reciting poetry about God. A perfect medieval morning, loud, filthy, and smelling like humanity. The friar turns, pointing toward the tavern. "There, that's where sin begins, where men laugh while angels weep." You follow his finger to a crooked little inn, with a tilted sign that reads, "Tavern of the Fallen." On the doorstep sits a man in a grey cloak, holding a cup of wine. Half his face is hidden in shadow. It's the same man who looked at you before. When the friar shouts, he only smiles and raises his cup like toasting the accusation. That small gesture throws the crowd into chaos. Heretic! He mocks the holy word. A soldier steps forward, but the man says calmly, his voice deep and weary, "I laugh because your holy words sound like dogs barking in the rain." The sentence drops like a stone. Silence spreads through the square. The friar's face turns crimson. He points and screams, "Seize him! Burn him before sunset!" The soldiers rush forward, but the man in the grey cloak doesn't flinch. He finishes his drink, sets down the cup, then turns to you, his gaze locking with yours. For a moment, it feels like time slips away, like the world itself blurs. "If you want to know the truth," he says, "come to the wine cellar beneath this tavern when the evening bell tolls 3 times. Then he stands, walks inside, and disappears, leaving the soldiers frozen in confusion. The friar yells again, but no one follows. Maybe they truly believe the devil lives in that tavern. The crowd disperses, half terrified, half curious. You stand there, still, until the boy from before whispers, "That's Alaric. He used to be at the northern monastery. They say he was banished for reading books without permission." "Reading books is a crime?" you ask. "Of course," he says. "Here, the smarter you are, the faster you burn." You sigh. In this world, intelligence is the quickest road to the graveyard. By evening, clouds roll in, staining the sky purple. You sit inside the tavern, waiting for the bells. Every voice, every flicker of torchlight makes your heart jump. The first bell rings, time freezes. The second hums low, echoing through rooftops, crawling into your chest. The third tolls deep, heavy, like the earth exhaling. You rise and follow the narrow wooden stairs down. The door creaks open. The air smells of damp, old wine, and oil lamps. At the far end, dim light glows from a single flame. Alaric sits there, in front of a small metal box, strange, bright, as if holding fire inside. He looks up, a faint smile crossing his face. "I knew you'd come," you stammer. Who are you?" "Someone who's seen what should never be seen," he says softly. "And now, I'll show you what the world has tried to bury." You don't know why your heart's racing so fast. But in that flickering light, surrounded by the scent of dust and wine, you realize this night won't just be a visit to a medieval village. It will be the doorway to a secret powerful enough to change an entire age. The man sat in silence, the flickering light of the oil lamp casting moving shadows across his gaunt face. His cloak was worn, frayed at the edges, damp from rain, but in his eyes burned something no one could extinguish, the light of someone who had seen the truth and could no longer look away. You stood a few steps away, your back still pressed against the staircase, hardly daring to breathe. He didn't look at you right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and took out a round brass object. It looked like your grandmother's sewing tin, but when he pressed it, a faint blue light shone against the stone wall. "Do you see it?" he asked, his voice low and rough like aged wine. You nodded, heart pounding, unable to look away from the glow. It projected circles, strange symbols, and tiny pieces of metal spinning as if alive. "What is that?" you whispered. "Knowledge," he said. "The thing people fear more than the devil himself." He closed the device, and darkness swallowed the cellar again. "They call me a heretic, a madman, because I dared to say the sun doesn't revolve around us. But I'm not mad, I just read more than they did." He gave a dry, bitter laugh. "Do you know how long this world has slept? 1,000 years. And in that sleep, anyone who dares to dream is called a traitor." You stepped closer and saw the table covered in scrolls, sketches of symbols, gears, and what looked like a crude lens. "You made all this?" you asked. "No," Alaric replied. "I kept it safe. The one who created it burned on the pyre. A nameless genius. He called it the human light, a way for knowledge to multiply itself." His voice dropped. The church feared it. Because when knowledge no longer needs priests to pass it on, they lose their hold on every soul. You froze, feeling as though you were hearing a truth forbidden for centuries. "But what do you want to do with it?" "Give it back to the world," Alaric said, his eyes shining. "But I can't travel far. Every road is guarded. I need someone they won't suspect." He paused, studying you, then said softly, "Someone like you." You almost choked. "Me? I'm just a tourist, a lost traveller." He smiled a weary smile, but filled with something strangely certain. "The world's been lost for a long time. You're just walking alongside it." From the metal box, he pulled out a rolled piece of old parchment and handed it to you. "Inside is the design for the human light. If you reach the north, the monastery of the New Dawn, you'll find those who still believe knowledge is not a sin." You hesitated, your hands trembling as you took it. The parchment was soft but warm, as if breathing. "Why trust me?" you asked. He looked at you for a long moment before answering, "Because you looked at me without fear." Outside, the wind rose, whistling through the cracks of the door like a whisper. The oil lamp flickered, the flame dancing across the wall, lighting the map he had spread out. "From here," he said, pointing. "Go through the Black Forest, then follow the Frost River. But never travel under a full moonlight, will betray you." You nodded, still not fully believing you'd just become a courier of forbidden knowledge. "And if I'm caught?" "Don't get caught," he said, voice firm as stone. "If they find the parchment, burn it before they burn you." He met your eyes, and you knew he wasn't joking. The air in the cellar thickened. You could hear your heartbeat, the slow drip of wine from a barrel, and something else, the whisper of the earth itself. "They'll come for me," Alaric said. "But that doesn't matter. Knowledge only dies when no one dares to keep it." He stood, holding a candle to light your way out. In its glow, you saw the torn mark of a rope burn on his collar, the scar of someone who had once been hanged and survived. "You were executed?" He chuckled hoarsely. "Yes, but perhaps God was napping that day." You laughed, though your stomach tightened with cold dread. Before you left, he stopped you and said quietly, "You'll see worse than burning. But if you survive, Remember this. This light belongs to no one." His hand rested on your shoulder, gentle as a blessing. Then he turned away, sat back down, and raised his cup once more as if he already knew this would be his last. You opened the cellar door, and a rush of cold air swept in, carrying the scent of ash and snow. Above, the night bells began to toll slow, deep, echoing. Each chime counted down to the moment you would leave the world of those who feared knowledge and step into another where one secret could change the Middle Ages forever. They called him Alaric, the exiled monk, the man who once vowed his life to God but chose to betray the church to stay loyal to knowledge. In this village, his name was spoken like a curse. Anyone who mentioned it had to cross themselves and glance over their shoulder to make sure lightning hadn't struck them yet. But to you, Alaric didn't look like a heretic. He looked like someone who once believed in the light, then realized the true light wasn't inside the church, it was outside the walls it built. In the damp cellar, he sat across from you, his rough hands turning that strange metal box, his voice deep but steady, like someone who had spoken these words 100 times to ears that never listened. "The day I was cast out," he said, staring up at the ceiling fog curling above. "They claimed I'd sold my soul to the devil, but they were wrong. The devil doesn't need to buy souls, he just needs people to fear knowledge." He smiled faintly, and in that smile was exhaustion, bitterness, and something painfully human. "You know," he continued, "I once thought knowledge was the path to the divine. But every truth I learned pulled me one step further from God, or at least from the men who claim to speak for him. They fear what I understand, because once I do, I no longer need them." You stayed silent, listening to the wind hiss through the cracks and the candle crackle like the heartbeat of the old cellar itself. Alaric reached for another scroll and unrolled it. Not a blueprint this time, but a map dotted with red marks connecting monasteries, forests, rivers, and forgotten villages. "These are the ones who carried the light," he said. "They called themselves the copyists. Their duty was to hide the records of knowledge from the church, to protect them until humanity became brave enough to read again." He pointed to a small sun symbol in the map's corner. "Here, the northern monastery. That's where I want you to go. There are still a few who believe truth isn't a sin. They're the last of us." "Why don't you come with me?" you asked. "Because I'm being watched," Alaric said, his tone dry as stone. "What do you think happens in a world where understanding is heresy? I survived the pyre once, I doubt I'll be that lucky twice." He took a sip of wine, squinting at you over the rim. "Besides, they might trust you more than a man they believe crawled out of the grave." You laughed, the sound catching in your throat. "So the church really fears knowledge that much?" Alaric leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his eyes burning with a quiet fire. "Do you know what gives them power? Not faith monopoly. They control the words, the language, the very way people think. When you can only read what they write, you can only believe what they allow." He paused, then whispered, "A single book can change the world, if it isn't burned." Outside, thunder rolled, the wind slamming against the window as if trying to tear the place apart. The oil lamp shook, its light trembling just like you. I'm not sure I'm brave enough," you said softly. Alaric chuckled, not mockingly, but with a kind of sad warmth. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's walking anyway." He placed his calloused hand on your shoulder, and for the first time, in this frozen, fearful world, you felt something like faith. "They'll call you a heretic, a traitor, a demon in human skin," he said, his voice softening. "Don't worry. They said the same about me, and I still drink better wine than they do." You laughed genuinely this time. Alaric laughed too, the sound raspy, echoing like cracking wood. Then he pulled a leather cord from inside his robe. Hanging from it was a small metal charm carved with a sunday. "Take this," he said. "If anyone asks where you're from, tell them, I'm searching for the light." You took it, feeling the charm cold in your hand but glowing faintly from within. "Go," he said. "Before dawn. When day breaks, the patrols will search everywhere." You nodded, stepping toward the cellar door. But before you opened it, you turned back and asked, "If I succeed, what should I tell them about you?" He looked up, the lamp's glow flickering in his eyes. "Tell them nothing. Knowledge doesn't need the name of its keeper, only the courage of those who pass it on." That answer would stay with you for years, but that night you could only nod. When the door opened, cold wind rushed in, carrying the scent of soil and darkness. You stepped out, pulling your cloak tight, clutching the scroll to your chest. Behind you, Alaric's voice echoed low and distant. And if one day you see the light fading, remember it once lived in your hands. Then the cellar door closed, leaving you alone in a sleeping village. On the night when history quietly changed its course, one night, when the whole village slept, you heard the church bell echo deep and long, like the earth itself exhaling. 3 tolls, then silence. Everything sank into stillness so complete you could hear the wind threading through the gaps in the wooden walls of your shabby room. You opened your eyes. The darkness was thick as water, only the pale silver of moonlight spilling through the small window, pooling across the uneven floorboards. Beside you, Alaric's scroll still rested in your coat pocket, warm and heavy, as if it were breathing. Outside, the wind hissed, dogs barked somewhere far away, then fell silent. A strange instinct made you sit up, pull on your cloak, and step out. The air outside was so cold your breath froze mid-air. The village lay buried in quiet, not a single lamp burning, only the whitewash of moonlight coating the thatched roofs. You heard something, metal, striking metal, softly, rhythmically, from the direction of the tavern. You crept along the damp road, careful to avoid the puddles that reflected the sky. Closer now, torchlight flickered beneath the cellar door where Alaric had once Saturday. Someone was inside. You held your breath, pressed your ear against the stone. Inside came footsteps, then the clatter of falling objects, the scrape of a blade across a table. A voice, cold and clipped, said, "Nothing, he's gone." Then another, deeper. "Search, tear apart every grain of dust. Heresy does not get to live." Your heart pounded. You stepped back, hiding behind the wall just in time, as 2 soldiers in black armor climbed from the cellar. One carried a leather-bound book, Alaric's notebook. He lifted it, sneering. "Told you, even knowledge must bow." Then he tossed the book into the torch. Fire roared, devouring each page. Your fists clenched, fury rising like a tide, but reason dragged you still. If you moved now, no one would be left to carry the secret. When the soldiers were gone, you slipped back down into the cellar. The door was shattered, furniture smashed, the air thick with smoke, wine, and ash. On the table was a blackened ring, the mark where the lightbox had once stood. You knelt, sifting through debris, until you found under the ashes something whole. The small metal sun Alaric had worn. You lifted it, blew off the soot. The metal was freezing, but still glowed faintly in the dark. "You're still here," you whispered. In the distance, hooves thundered closer. You hid the charm, pulled your hood tight, and slipped out the back. At the alley's end, the main road was blocked. Torches gleamed on armor like a river of fire. No way back. You followed the wall toward the open fields behind the village. The wind there cut like glass, but at least there were no people. You walked, Alaric's words echoing in your head. "Never travel under a full moon, light will betray you." But tonight the moon was the fullest you'd ever seen. Every step felt exposed eyes watching from every shuttered house, from the woods beyond, perhaps even from the sky itself. At the end of the path you heard hooves halt behind you. A voice, low and familiar. "Stop." You turned in the silver light, stood the captain of the guard. His face was hidden beneath a steel helm, only the glint of eyes cold as forged iron. "You know where the old heretic is?" he said. "No," you answered, steadying your breath. "I'm just a traveller with no fear. You walk beneath the full moon, when devils hunt in the trees." He dismounted, stepped close, the edge of his sword gleaming. "If you speak truth, I'll let you live. If not..." He raised the blade. In that instant, moonlight flashed on the metal in your hand. He froze, staring. The sun emblem of the heretics. You swallowed hard, your heart wild. No way back. You did the only thing you could, hurled the charm straight at his face and ran. Shouts, hooves thundered after you. The wind tore at your cloak, snow and dirt stung your eyes. You raced across the fields, leapt a fence, slid down a slope, lungs burning, Ahead, the forest. You dove into it, branches whipping your arms, the roar of wind filling your ears. Behind you, the pursuit faded, then vanished. You stopped only when all that remained was your heartbeat and the rustle of leaves. You collapsed against a tree, gasping, and reached for your coat. The scroll was still there. Under the moon, the ink had blurred, but the lines, the strange, mechanical symbols still shone clear. You smiled, hands trembling. I won't let them win. You looked up at the blazing moonlight pouring through the trees. If light is a sin, you whispered, then tonight I am the greatest sinner of all. He opened the box, blue light burst forth, spilling across the damp stone walls like a living flame. The whole room came alive, dust swirling in the glow like tiny souls being awakened. You stepped back on instinct, your heart pounding so hard you could almost hear it, while Alaric only looked up and smiled wearily. "No," he said, his voice rough as wind through a well. "This isn't a ghost. This is knowledge." He set the box on the table, the light reflecting off the drawings around it, making them seem to move. Ink lines trembled to life, gears and curves of metal shimmering silver. "This," he said, "is what they fear most. Not demons, not swords, ideas." You stared at the box, caught between curiosity and awe. Inside the metal shell, something moved like a mechanical heart, pulsing. Tiny shards of crystal spun around a central axis, glowing a pale blue. "How did you get it?" you asked, careful not to touch, half afraid it might explode like a modern bomb. Alaric smiled, his eyes glinting with rare childlike joy. "I didn't get it. It found me." Seeing your confusion, he explained, "A man brought it here before they hanged him. He called it the memory box, said it holds the knowledge of hundreds of years, thousands of people. When they were burned, their wisdom stayed." He placed a hand on the box, gentle as if stroking a living creature. They recorded it in light, something only those brave enough to look could see. You leaned closer and saw, reflected on the stone walls, hundreds of floating symbols, drifting like words written in mist. They shifted, spun, then fused into shapes of gears, of people, before dissolving again. "How does it work?" you asked, eyes wide. "Light remembers," he said. "It never dies. It only gets trapped, like people do." You gave a small laugh. "You sound like a philosopher." He shook his head. "I'm just being honest. Do you know why I call it knowledge? Because it frightens you. True knowledge is never gentle. It shakes you like it's shaking you now. And it was true. You couldn't tell if you were scared or reverent. The light wasn't just beautiful, it felt ancient, timeless, something beyond belief itself. "If this exists, why doesn't anyone know?" you asked. "Because they chose to forget," he said. "Do you think knowledge is born in light?" "No. It's born in darkness. And every time someone tries to bring it out, the dark gets angry." He bent down, opened a small compartment beneath the box, and pulled out a round copper mirror. He placed it opposite the box, and immediately the blue light split into dozens of rays, painting the walls with new images, a machine of gears and levers, and an inscription in an old tongue. "Lux Scriptorium, the writer of light." You exhaled sharply, stepping back. "That's a printing machine?" Alaric nodded slightly. "Not mine, theirs. A group of rebel monks in the north. They built it to copy knowledge without pen, without hand. When the church found out, they called it a devil's device and burned them all." He paused, his voice lowering. "Only this box survived. And their memory." You went silent, your throat dry. "How long have you kept it?" 20 winters, he said. "I once thought I'd die with it. But then, that night, I saw you." He looked at you as if redefining the word destiny. "I knew someone would finally listen." The box's glow softened, fading. He sighed, turned a brass knob, and the light went out. Darkness returned, broken only by a single candle flame, illuminating two faces, one old, one young, both carrying the fear and hunger of those who know too much. "Do you understand why they fear it?" he whispered. "Because this light doesn't bow. It cannot be forced to believe." He looked up at the dripping ceiling, where drops fell like the stone's tears. "The day they burned the first man who built it, I was in the crowd. I heard him shout before the fire took him. "Burn me, but you cannot burn the light." I laughed then, thought it was madness. But tonight, when that same light still touches my face, I know he was right. He placed the box in your hands. It was lighter than you expected, yet it felt like holding a world. "Take it," he said. "To the north, to those who still live unafraid of truth." You looked at him, wanting to speak, but your throat locked. "What if they find you?" He only smiled. "I've lived long enough to know dying for knowledge is better than living to forget it." His eyes gleamed like the light in the box, calm, defiant, and endless. You gripped it tight, feeling its warmth seep through your palms. For a moment, you weren't a lost traveler anymore. You were part of something larger, a story humanity had spent centuries trying to erase. Then Alaric spoke one final sentence, so soft you had to lean in to hear it. "If you live, don't tell my name. Tell of the light. It's the only thing worth remembering." And in the fading glow of the candle, you saw his eyes shimmer as if they held an unwritten sky. Inside the box were old rolled-up drawings, the edges scorched, the smell of ink mingled with the scent of metal. Alaric carefully unrolled each sheet, as if even a strong breath might turn history into dust. The blue light from the box washed over his face, revealing every wrinkle, every scar along his collar, traces of a time he'd once been bound to the stake. You leaned closer, and your heart nearly stopped. On the first page was a machine interlocking gears, levers, rods, and a convex lens at the center. It looked part canon, part something far beyond this century's imagination. "Is this supposed to shoot demons?" you asked, half joking, half serious, because it did look like a weapon. Alaric laughed, a rough but ringing sound, like he'd just heard a child's question after years of silence. "No," he said, eyes glinting. "It shoots. The future." He pointed to the cylindrical lens in the drawing. "This doesn't fire bullets, it fires light. It engraves knowledge into metal knowledge that never fades. Burn it, and the truth still remains in the grooves. They can't kill it." You looked closer indeed. The markings on the paper weren't letters but spiraling circles, connected like coded signals. "So, who built it?" you asked. Alaric drew a sharp breath, then whispered, as if someone might be listening. "They called him the Light Engraver, a mechanic, a monk, and the first man ever branded a traitor to the holy word." He pulled out more pages, sketches of drive systems, gears, rotating shafts, and a dome-like device radiating hundreds of lines of light. "He said," Alaric continued, "knowledge shouldn't live in one man's mouth. It should be carved into the world. If you write with light, no one can twist your words." He paused, gaze drifting far away. "You know, they executed him for drawings just like these. Said he'd built the devil's eye because only the devil could see everything at once." He gave a short laugh, sharp as a blade cutting the night. "Funny, isn't it? People worship light, but kill anyone who tries to bring it closer." You lifted a sheet, your hands trembling. The ink was faded, but the lines were alive. "If this worked," you said, "it would change everything. No priests, no scribes, no censorship." Alaric nodded. "Exactly, and that's why they fear it. When everyone can know, the man on the throne has nothing left to hold." He clasped his hands, staring at the dark, damp wall where the lamplight flickered over old stains. "When I was in the monastery, I heard stories of him. They said he finished part of the machine, even tested it. A sheet of metal etched by light holding thousands of symbols in one night. By morning, he was hanging from the cathedral gate." Alaric lowered his voice. 10 years later, I went to that place, dug under the ruins, and found the core this." He opened a hidden compartment and took out a silver cylinder, bright and heavy. "This is the machine's heart. It doesn't rust, doesn't burn, doesn't break. I don't know what metal it is, only that it doesn't belong to this age." You reached out, touching it. It was like ice, vibrating faintly, like a plucked string from a faraway harp. "If we could restore it," you said, "we could reprint knowledge," he finished, eyes lighting up. "We could replicate thought, spread truth. A world where farmers can read, where a child doesn't need a priest to understand scripture." He paused, looked at you, and smiled softly. "Sounds dangerous, doesn't it?" You laughed. "Sounds like the fastest way to get burned alive." "Exactly. Alaric said. "But that's the price of the future." Outside, the wind howled over the roof, carrying the chill of early snow. The lamp flickered, casting the two of you in trembling light, two silhouettes plotting to rewrite history. "Do you see it?" he asked. "Every gear in these drawings is a vow. They died so knowledge would keep turning. Now it's my turn, and maybe yours." You said nothing. It was too big, too mad, yet inside something stirred. It felt like you were standing at the moment history tilted. "If I go," you asked, "what happens to this?" Alaric brushed his fingers over the metal core and murmured, "If you live, it will be light. If you die, it will be a testament." You pressed your lips together, then said, "Then I'll take it." He smiled, a warmth so human it cut through the cold. "Good. But remember, don't let anyone see this light. If they do, they'll call it magic. And in this age, magic has only one ending: fire." You nodded, carefully rolling up the papers and tucking them into your coat. When you looked up, the blue glow in the box was fading. The cellar darkened, the only light now from the small flame reflecting in Alaric's eyes. "The future," he said slowly, "doesn't explode like gunfire. It spreads like light. And once it touches the first soul, no one can extinguish it." You looked at him for a long time, then nodded. Inside you, that light still burned, the light he called knowledge. But you knew it was more than that. It was the fire that would open the path for all humankind, beginning with a single metal box in the cold cellar of a man the world called a heretic. Alaric sat with his back against the wall, the blue light from the box long gone, leaving only the dim flicker of an oil lamp reflected in his eyes. His voice sank low, steady and heavy, like wind pushing through the cellar door. "You know," he began, "for hundreds of years, some monks have secretly hidden a creation, something that, if revealed, could bring down an entire kingdom. The work of a scholar burned alive." He paused, poured a bit of wine, its sharp scent filling the air. "He wasn't a prophet, nor a sorcerer, just a man who loved words more than life itself. His name was Armand de Villers, an engraver, a monk, and the first heretic of the South." You listened, your heartbeat slowing, pulled into every word. "Armand," Alaric continued, "believed knowledge should multiply like seeds. He watched scribes spend their lives copying holy texts by hand. One slip of ink, and a soul could be lost. He wanted to change that. He built a machine not from magic, but from metal, ink, and will." He smiled faintly, eyes distant. "A machine that could copy words faster than any hand. Each line, each letter, printed by light itself. He called it Pressa Lucem, the machine of light." Alaric placed a hand on his chest, where his heart beat slow and tired. "Do you know what they told him when he presented it to the monastic council? 'The devil has entered your hands.'" He tilted his head back, laughing dryly. "They were afraid not because they didn't understand, but because they understood too well. If one man could copy knowledge, then the word of God would no longer belong to them alone. Fear became flame, and Armand was burned in the very monastery he had once served." You whispered, "What happened to the machine?" Alaric's eyes dimmed. "They tore it apart, piece by piece, and hid it across different monasteries. One part was thrown into the sea, another buried beneath a crypt. The final piece, its heart, the part that made the light, ended up here, in my hands." He pointed to the metal box beside him, his tone deepening. "I don't know if Armand ever imagined what would come after him, but I know the fire that burned him didn't burn his idea. Some monks, those who still believed in truth, risked their lives to save his blueprints. They formed a secret order, calling themselves Custodes Veritatis, the keepers of truth." He exhaled, eyes distant. "They lived scattered, disguised as healers, blacksmiths, scribes. Each one kept a fragment of the design. And they swore one day, when the world was brave enough to read again, they'd reunite it." You asked softly, "And you? You're one of them?" Alaric smiled faintly, neither confirming nor denying. "I came after. I wasn't chosen. I just followed the trail. When the church found out, they thought burning me would be enough. But this light," he touched the box, "has survived 1,000 fires." He stood and walked to the stone wall, where faint carvings shimmered under the lamp. "These lines," he said, "are Armand's final words, carved with a blade before they took him. If fire is the test, let light be the witness." He traced the words gently, his voice catching. "I read them once, on a storm night, and I understood. He didn't ask to be forgiven. He only wanted to be understood." Wind howled through the cracks. The flame flickered, stretching his shadow long across the wall. "You see," Alaric whispered, "one man who dares to think differently can shake an empire. But the tragedy is men don't need demons to kill knowledge. They only need fear." He turned to you, eyes burning. "You think Gutenberg was the first to invent the press?" "No. He was just the first lucky enough to live in an age where knowledge wasn't called witchcraft. Armand came before and paid with his life to open that door. You said nothing. You'd never read this story in any history book. So what will you do with what's left of it?" you asked. Alaric smiled faintly. "Finish it. Or die with it. Either way, a man is just one gear in the greater machine. What matters is that it keeps turning." He pulled a crescent-shaped piece of metal from his pocket. It fit perfectly into the silver cylinder you'd seen before. When the two connected, there was a soft click, then a flicker of light, weak, trembling, but alive. "It's still breathing," he murmured, as if afraid to wake the past. You stared at the glow, feeling like you were witnessing a metal heart take its first beat after centuries. "Do you see now?" Alaric asked. "This isn't a printing press, it's a machine of memory. It engraves time into metal, preserves the words of those who were silenced. And when I restore it, the world will hear the voices that fire could not devour." He looked at you for a long moment. "But to keep it alive, I need someone to carry it. I need you." Outside, thunder rolled the growl of an era shifting. You looked at the light in his hands, then at his eyes holding both faith and despair, the kind only found in those who've lost everything for an idea. And in that moment, you understood. This was no longer Alaric's story, nor Armand's. It was humanity's, the story of those who dared to write, to think, to let the light burn, even knowing it would consume them too. Alaric stayed silent for a long time after speaking of Armand, as if he too was listening to the voices of those swallowed by time. In the cellar, only the soft crackle of the candle flame remained, mingling with the whisper of wind seeping through the stones. He lifted the metal core, turning it slowly in his hand so the faint light shimmered against the wall. "You know," he said deliberately, "if people ever learned that knowledge could be replicated, the church's power would tremble." The words didn't just echo through the stone, they hung heavy in the air. You didn't understand right away, but the look in his eyes etched every syllable deep into your mind. "They exist by monopolizing belief," Alaric continued, "and knowledge is the blade that splits belief in two. When everyone can read, understand, and question, who still needs a priest to pray for them?" He took a few steps, stopping by the table to stare down at Armand's drawings. "A printed letter isn't just ink, it's the right to speak. And when a farmer has the right to speak, those in power will have to listen. That's what terrifies them." He looked up, eyes catching firelight. "You see, knowledge isn't just light. It's a weapon. One book can kill a doctrine. One question can topple a throne." You sat still, your throat tightening. The world you thought you knew suddenly felt small beneath the weight of his words. Alaric poured more wine, sat, and stared into the flame. "I once thought," he said, "that if I kept silent, everything would stay calm. But knowledge doesn't stay buried. It claws its way out through thought, through dreams, through the wind. And then I understood if I die without passing it on, I'm just another mute man in a burning crowd." He turned toward you, gaze sharp. "You're from the future, aren't you?" You froze. He smiled, took a sip. "Don't look so shocked. Only someone from another age would look at me without fear. No one here would dare sit in a cellar with a man stripped of God's grace." You didn't answer, but he didn't need you to. "You see," he went on, "knowledge has always been the flame mankind, both lights and fears. They crave the light but won't look at it. And that's how power is born. The one who holds the light rules those who fear the dark." He raised the metal core high. The reflection cast a warped halo over his head. "The church holds light in its hands and calls it God. But the true God isn't in the chapel, he's in those who dare to ask why." You whispered. "And you?" Who do you believe in? Alaric smiled faintly. I believe in what they call sin. I believe in curiosity. The thing that makes man look at the stars and ask why. The thing that drove Armand to build his machine, and that keeps me sitting here waiting to die. If curiosity is sin, then humanity has been guilty since it first opened its eyes. He stood, walked to a wooden shelf, and took down an old book. Its cover was scorched, but inside were shaky, uneven lines handwritten in haste before the flames reached. This, he said, is what's left of the Pressa Lucem, not the blueprints the words Armand left for those who'd come after. He read aloud, voice low and resonant like a church bell. When knowledge belongs to all, God will no longer sit upon the throne, but in the hands of every man who can read. He stopped, closed the book, his gaze sharp as a blade. Do you see now? That's why they had to kill him. Not because he was a heretic, but because he wanted everyone to become priests. You shivered. That sentence turned the world upside down. In your history, the church was the pillar, the light, the keeper of heaven's key. But in his story, they were only the guardians of darkness. And if this, Alaric pointed to the metal core, is restored, if I can make it work again. He paused, a slow smile forming. Then their words will lose their monopoly. They will no longer be the only voice of God. Outside, the night bell tolled again, deep and distant. Alaric looked toward the cellar door, whispering, I've lost everything, rank, faith, friends, just to keep this fragment of knowledge alive. But if you take it, if you give it to someone who can use it, then every loss will mean something. He held the core out to you, his trembling hand steadying in resolve. You took it, feeling its weight like a burden and a calling. If people knew knowledge could be replicated, you repeated, they would never bow again. Yes, Alaric said softly, and that's why they'll do anything to keep it hidden. He stared into the flame, a tired smile on his lips. But you know what? Nothing can hide the light forever. Fire can burn men, but it's also what carries knowledge into the air. You only need one spark and the world will burn anew. He lifted his head, his eyes locking on yours. Take it. And remember, never trust those who claim to guard the light. True light needs no guards. It only needs someone brave enough to open their eyes to it. You nodded, gripping the core tight, feeling strange warmth spreading through the cold metal. Outside, the wind sighed through the cracks, like the breath of the past itself. And in the cellar, Alaric sat bathed in the glow of the lamp, half in light, half in shadow, like the thin line between sin and knowledge he had sworn to protect. You looked at him, genuinely shaken. What Alaric had just said sounded like prophecy, like a fragment of revelation you were never meant to bear. The cellar was dim, the oil lamp trembling, its light dancing across the metal gears, creating the illusion that they were moving, even though no one touched them. Everything felt like a half-finished dream, and you were the one pulled into it. So, what do you want me to do? You blurted out. I'm just a time traveler, a lost wanderer. You gave a nervous laugh, your voice unsteady. Alaric looked at you for a long time. His eyes were deep as an ancient well, and in them you saw your own reflection, the kind that showed everything you didn't want to remember. He said softly, No one is just a wanderer. When knowledge finds you, it means you've been chosen. You waved your hands, your voice cracking. No, you don't understand. I don't belong here. I come from somewhere else. A place where people don't burn books anymore, where they're not afraid of the light. I just got caught up in this. Alaric tilted his head slightly, a faint smile crossing his lips. You think your world has escaped fear? No. They've only changed the shape of the darkness. It's always the same. Those who fear losing power will always find a new name for knowledge, heresy, danger, or maybe even misinformation. The words struck you like a chill. Somehow, his voice seemed to pierce through time, reaching a place very close, a place you once lived, where you'd seen people argue, cover their ears, and fear the truth. You didn't come here by accident, he continued, his voice low like a midnight bell. Time doesn't make mistakes. It only brings knowledge to where it's needed most. You braced yourself on the table, breathing hard. Where do you want me to take this thing? I don't know the way. I don't know who's hunting you, and I'm not even sure if I'm awake or dreaming. Alaric slowly poured wine into 2 cups. Awake or dreaming doesn't matter. What's truly frightening is when a man knows he's awake but still keeps his eyes shut. He pushed a cup toward you. Drink. It'll stop your hands from shaking. This wine was once used to bless the condemned before the flames. You frowned. That's not very comforting. He laughed, rough and low. Don't worry. If I meant to kill you, I'd have done it long before you knew my name. You took a small sip. The wine was bitter, sharp, cold like swallowing metal, but it cleared your head. Now listen carefully, Alaric said. You'll take this core north. There's an abandoned monastery called St. Orlan. Beneath it lies a cellar, with a door locked by 3 seals. It only opens with the sun symbol and Armand's script. I've already taught you how to read them. He handed you the round metal medallion etched with a sun, the same one you'd once seen gleaming in firelight. This is the key. Don't lose it. You took it, feeling as if you were holding your own heart. What about you? You asked. Alaric was silent for a moment, staring at the dying candle. I'll stay. When the soldiers come, they'll think I still have the core. The farther you go, the longer the flame will live. He paused, studying you, as if trying to memorize your face. You can call it a mission, or a punishment. That's up to you. You wanted to protest, to tell him you weren't brave enough, not wise enough, but his eyes silenced you. They weren't the eyes of someone commanding you. They were the eyes of someone giving away the last piece of himself. I might die, you whispered. We all die, Alaric replied. But not everyone dies for something worth remembering. The words made the cellar feel larger, like you were sitting between 2 eras. He turned away, gathered the remaining drawings, and tied them in an old piece of cloth. If you can't reach the monastery, find the Frost River. Follow the water north, it will lead you, and if you're caught... He stopped, lips tightening. Burn the drawings, but never burn the core. Knowledge should never die in the hands of those who understand it. You swallowed hard and nodded. Fear coursed through you, but so did something else, a spark, small but alive, like belief you didn't know you had. I'll go, you said quietly, but firmly. Alaric looked at you, a rare, warm smile flickering on his face. Good. Then you're no longer just a wanderer. He handed you a thick, heavy cloak. Travel by night. Let no one see you. If it starts to snow, keep walking. When you think you're lost, that's when you're on the right path. You wrapped the cloak around you, tucking the metal core close to your chest. Before leaving, you turned back. Aren't you afraid? You asked. Alaric answered softly. Yes. But fear is what reminds us we're still alive. He raised his cup, his rough voice steady. To the future, the one they'll never get to burn. You bowed your head and opened the cellar door. The night wind rushed in, carrying snow and the scent of ash. As you stepped out, you heard his voice echo faintly behind you, light as breath. Remember, wanderer, don't let the future get lost with you. And when you looked up, the black sky was already breaking, the first traces of dawn beginning to show. Alaric stood and walked to the wooden table where the drawings were neatly wrapped in dark cloth. He unfolded the cover, and the scent of dried ink and beeswax filled the air, sharp and strangely sweet. The light from the oil lamp reflected off the intricate lines, gears interlocked, shafts connected by strange symbols, annotations written in an ancient language you had never seen. He carefully folded them, tied them with hemp string, and placed the bundle into your hands. Take it north, he said slowly, his voice low but firm. Someone is waiting. They believe in the light, not the torch. You looked down at the bundle, feeling it heavier than iron. North, how far is that? Farther than fear itself, he replied, his eyes glinting in the dark. The road twists, but the destination is one. Walk long enough, and the light will find you. You gave a nervous laugh, half from tension, half from how much his words sounded like scripture. What light? I don't see anything but snow and darkness. Alaric laughed too, a rough, broken sound from a man who had lived too long between faith and despair. The light isn't out there, he said, placing a hand on your chest. It's here. As long as you remember, it will never go out. He turned away, took down an old, faded map from a shelf, and spread it across the table. His finger traced a faint inked line that wove through forests, mountains, and rivers. This is the old path. They call it the blind way east. No one walks it anymore. They say it leads to where the light dies. But that's what the church wants them to believe. In truth, at the end of that road lies the Aurora Monastery, where the last of the Order of Light still hide. They guard the old knowledge, waiting for the one who carries the final piece. He looked up at you, his gaze asking a question you didn't want to answer. Do you dare? You swallowed hard. If they've been waiting, why don't they come find you? Alaric smiled, faintly tired, sad. Because I'm already dead. To them, I'm just a name on a list of heretics. If they saw me, they'd burn me before asking why. He hesitated, his voice lowering. You are my last hope, and maybe theirs. You looked at the bundle in your hands, your heart beat loud in your ears. I'm not a hero. I don't need a hero, he said instantly. I need someone willing to go. He pulled a small vial from a drawer inside, shimmered a fine, silvery powder. This is silver dust. If you're in danger, throw it into a fire. The smoke will change color. My people will see it and come for you. But only once. He handed it to you, his eyes serious. And remember, let no one touch the bundle. Not a monk, not a man with a cross, not someone claiming to be sent by God. Because in this age, demons read scripture better than men. You gave a nervous laugh, but your heart was pounding. Everything was happening too fast, too impossibly. An hour ago, you were just an outsider. Now, you were carrying the future. What if I never reach the monastery? You asked. Alaric looked straight into your eyes and said quietly, then burn it. Better to let knowledge scatter in the wind than fall into the hands of those who'd strangle it. Thunder rolled in the distance. A cold wind rushed through the cracks, shaking the lamp. The firelight flickered across his face, half bright, half dark, as if even the light itself wasn't sure it wanted to stay with him. I once thought I could keep it, he murmured. But I'm old now. Every torch burns out in the end. You're younger. You can go farther than I ever could. He turned his back, voice sinking low. I've buried friends, brothers, even those I loved, all to protect a few sheets of paper. And now, I can't let them die with me. The world's grown weary of the dark. It's time someone carried the light. You bit your lip, your hands gripping the bundle tight, hearing the paper rustle like a heartbeat. They'll hunt me, you said. They'll chase me to the ends of the earth. Alaric turned back, his eyes calm, almost peaceful. Good. If they're chasing you, they'll have no time to kill anyone else. He placed a hand on your shoulder. You can't save the world, but you can save an idea. And ideas, sometimes they're stronger than kings. The seller fell silent at that. You looked around the drawings, the old gears, the dimly glowing box. All of it felt like witnesses to a sacred passing, where knowledge was leaving darkness to walk toward light. You put on your cloak, tucked the bundle under the folds. Alaric walked you to the cellar door. The wind swept down the stone corridor, snuffing out the lamp, leaving only the faint blue glow from the box to guide your way. North, he said one last time. Follow the cold wind. When you hear 3 bells, don't be afraid that's their signal. But if you hear 4... He stopped, his eyes darkening. Then run, and don't look back. You nodded and stepped out. The sky was pitch black, the moon hidden behind clouds. In the distance, snow began to fall slow, silent, melting into your palms. You turned back. Alaric still stood in the doorway, small against the wind, like a ghost refusing to fade. They believe in the light, he said again, not the torch. Find them, before the fire finds you. Then the stone door closed, its echo fading into the night like the prayer of a man who knew he would never see the dawn. You set out while the sky was still dim, the fog so thick it felt like you were stepping through a dream dissolving underfoot. On your shoulder, Alaric's bundle was wrapped tight in oiled cloth, swaying with every step. Each time the wind blew, the rope brushed against your neck, reminding you that from now on, you were no longer just a wanderer, you were carrying a secret that could burn down an entire age. Still, your mind as usual refused to stay quiet. If I save knowledge, you muttered, do I get a tax cut? Then you let out a quiet laugh. the laugh of someone trying to swallow fear with a bit of humour. Snow fell, light but thick, layering your cloak in white. The road out of the village faded into a pale grey hush, so silent that your footsteps sounded like they were echoing inside someone's heart. You pulled your cloak tight and glanced back. Alaric's village was still veiled in mist, only the vague outlines of the church and bell tower visible. You wondered, is he still alive? Then you shook your head, forcing the image away. In this age, hope was rarer than gold. You crossed an abandoned field, where dry grass tangled around your boots like dead hands. Far off, crows called, their cries lonely and broken. The wind from the north carried the scent of salt and the sharp cold of a distant sea, a smell that froze your spine. With every step, Alaric's words echoed in your head. When you think you're lost, that's when you're on the right path. Sure, you muttered, but if the right path leads straight to a graveyard, that's not much comfort. The sky brightened slowly. Weak sunlight broke through the clouds, casting light over mossy stones. You stopped by an old tree, pulled out a piece of hard bread Alaric had given you. It tasted so awful, you suspected it might have been his final test of faith. You chewed and stared at your footprints stretching across the snow. Ahead, the road split. One path climbed toward the ruins of an old monastery. The other turned down into a forest where the snow deepened and the shadows waited. You chose the forest not out of courage, but because you always tended to choose the path that looked least crowded. Branches whipped your face, snow slipped down your collar. The wind whispered through the trees, sounding almost like voices. Once, you thought you heard your name. Not real, you told yourself, just the wind. But your chest still went cold. When the sun rose higher, the snow stopped falling, but the air stayed knife-sharp. You paused by a stream, the water clear, and so cold it hurt your teeth. You bent down, splashing your face, and saw your reflection trembling in the current a stranger. Hair tangled, skin darkened, eyes belonging to someone who had no idea where they were going. You laughed again. If I survive this, I'll open a tavern, sell knowledge by the glass. 1 sip for philosophy, 2 for science, 3 for regret. The laugh faded, leaving only the stream's murmur. You looked up and saw a flock of birds flying north. Guess I'm headed the right way, you muttered. The road climbed higher, snow deepening underfoot. Your legs ached, but in your mind, Alaric's voice wouldn't leave. They believe in the light, not the torch. The light, you thought. What light did he mean? Knowledge? Faith? Or was it the small, fragile flame still burning in your chest, faint but unyielding? You stopped and looked around. The village was long gone. Only mountains and forest remained. The snow was so white it felt like walking across a blank page, waiting for someone to write your ending. Night fell faster than you expected. Pale moonlight draped over the snow, making the world shimmer like it had turned to silver. You found a collapsed stone archway, maybe once a traveller's shelter. You lit a small fire and sat close, clutching the bundle to your chest. The wind whistled through the cracks, sounding like the sigh of a weary century. You thought of Alaric, of the blue light in the box, of his words, of that calm smile as he passed the burden to you. Part of you wanted to turn back, throw it all away, pretend none of it happened. But another part, one you didn't know existed, wanted to keep going. Maybe I really am insane, you whispered, then smiled faintly. Normal people don't wander through snow carrying the future in their pockets. The fire flickered, lighting your face. The wind howled, the snow fell, but for a moment, in that freezing night, you felt warm. Not from the fire before you, but from the one inside, the one Alaric had given you. You leaned back and looked up. The stars above shimmered dimly, watching. Hey, you said to them. If I die tomorrow, tell him I tried, okay? Then you closed your eyes. Sleep came slowly, but it wasn't cold. And when the night wind swept through, they said that deep in the frozen forest, someone lay sleeping under the moonlight, smiling still, the one carrying knowledge northward, unaware that they bore something greater than knowledge itself, the belief that even the smallest spark can shake the darkest night. The sound of hooves thundered through the snowy forest, making your heart nearly leap out of your chest. At first, you thought it was just the wind's echo until you heard metal clashing, and a shout slicing through the cold air. Stop! You turned, And there it was, the nightmare made real. 3 riders in black armour, bearing the crimson cross of the bishop. On their lances, the flags caught the moonlight, shining like faith itself had come to burn you alive. You didn't wait for questions. You ran. Snow burst behind you in white streaks. "Stop, heretic!" A deep voice boomed. "Surrender the forbidden relic, and you will be shown mercy." You gasped between breaths, shouting back, "It's just a photocopy!" Your voice echoed through the forest like a pathetic joke. The wind howled, snow stung your face, and your boots slid across the icy slope. Behind you, the hooves grew louder, pounding like war drums. You dodged between trees, leapt over rocks, your heartbeat thundering. "I can't die because of paper," you muttered. "At least let it be for wine, or a woman, or both." But there was no wine. No one. Just snow and your own ragged breath. An arrow slammed into a tree beside you, sinking halfway in. If you hadn't ducked in time, it would have replaced your hair with wood. You let out a dry laugh. Great. They're serious now. You darted into a narrow gap between 2 cliffs, barely wide enough for one person, praying the horses couldn't follow. The hooves stopped. Then came the hiss of swords being drawn. "Take him alive!" one voice barked. "The bishop wants to see the one who carries the devil's fire." You dove into a hollow under the rock, holding your breath. Footsteps crunched in the snow. One soldier bent down, scanning the shadows. You saw the gleam of his blade just inches from your head. Your hand clenched around the scroll beneath your cloak, your heart hammering. He stood still for a moment, then turned away, his footsteps faded. You exhaled, and right then, a snowflake dropped from above, landing squarely on your nose. "Achoo!" The sneeze echoed like a confession. "There!" He spun around, sword raised. You leapt up, hurled a handful of snow in his face, and bolted. Shouts, metal, chaos. A sword grazed your shoulder, tearing your cloak, searing your skin. You tumbled downhill, the world spinning. Below, the frozen river shimmered under the moonlight, a silver mirror waiting. No time to think. You jumped. The ice cracked open, water biting into your skin like knives. You gasped, flailing, then grabbed a floating slab of ice and clung as the current dragged you away. Behind you, the bishop's men stopped at the shore, shouting, but none dared follow. "The devil's taken him," one yelled. You surfaced, coughing, laughing hoarsely as icy water splashed your face. "Yeah," you wheezed, "and he's still better company than you lot." The river carried you through black bends and hidden rocks. Every collision felt like breaking in half, but your hand never let go of the scroll. The one thing you couldn't drop. Finally, the current flung you against a snowbank near a broken wooden bridge. You crawled out, shivering, your teeth clattering. The moon broke free of the clouds, shining on your face, pale, soaked, but alive. "Alaric," you gasped. "You owe me a drink. At least one." You wrapped your cloak tighter and stumbled on through the snow. In the distance, the forest opened onto a flat stretch of land. A faint glow flickered their firelight. A small hut, smoke curling into the sky. You hesitated, but the cold made the decision for you. You approached and knocked. The door creaked open. A woman stood there, eyes sharp, wary. "Who are you?" "A lost traveller," you said, "and kind of halfway to dead." She studied you, head to toe, then silently pulled you inside. It was warm, painfully warm after the cold. You sat by the fire, your skin stinging as it thawed. She placed a bowl of water on the table, her gaze falling to the scroll in your hands. "You carry something that belongs to them." Her voice wasn't a question, it was a statement. "I'm just keeping it safe," you said, tucking it closer under your cloak. "I don't want trouble." "Trouble," she repeated. "That's the price of knowledge." You looked up and saw it, the same light in her eyes that you'd once seen in Alaric's. "You know them?" "Of course," she said, smiling faintly. "I was once part of the Order of Light. But in my time, we didn't dare print words, we only dared light candles." She added more wood to the fire. The flames flared up, painting her wrinkled face with a strange, radiant glow. "And now," she whispered, "the light has returned in the form of a shivering fool lost in the snow." You winced. "Thanks for the compliment." She chuckled softly and handed you a blanket. "Sleep, traveller. Tomorrow, the road north gets longer. And if they come for you, remember the bearer of light must never stop moving. You lay down, listening to the wind howling outside, the fire crackling beside you. Inside, there was still a trace of fear, but mixed with it, a strange calm. Like every chase, every fall, had been leading you exactly where you were meant to be. You closed your eyes, thinking about your own words during the chase. It's just a photocopy. You smiled faintly. Maybe, just maybe, no one in history had ever carried a photocopy worth burning a world for until you. The next morning, when the snow stopped and the clouds began to clear, you left the strange woman's hut. She said only one sentence before closing the door. Go deeper into the forest. When you see smoke without fire, it means you're about to meet the one you seek. That line echoed in your mind like a riddle. You walked, your boots sinking into the snow, every breath turning to mist. The sun was just a pale streak of light between the trees, and the cold air swallowed every sound. You'd been walking for hours, seeing nothing but endless pine, until you smelled burning metal. Not campfire smoke, something sharper, a mix of hot iron, oil, and smoke. You moved closer, pushing through the branches, and froze. In the middle of the snowy forest stood a hidden forge, covered with thick hides and chimneys of stone. The hammering was deep and rhythmic, steam rising into the air like mist. Around it worked a dozen people, men, women, even a few children, all silent, eyes gleaming in the firelight. You started to back away when a gravelly voice came from behind you. You carry his scent. You turned. A tall, broad man with silver hair was watching you. On his arm was a tattoo, a gear wrapped in flame. I don't know who he is, you said, hiding the scroll inside your coat. I'm just heading north. He stepped forward, his eyes seeming to see through the fabric. Do you carry the light of Alaric? The question froze you in place. You know that name? The whole forest knows it, he said, jerking his chin toward the forge. Come in. Don't let the snow hear us. You followed them inside. The air was so warm it felt like the blood in your veins was melting. The blacksmiths stopped their work, staring silently. A young woman wearing a leather mask approached, took the scroll from you, unrolled it for just a heartbeat, then closed it again, her voice trembling. It's the real design. The light has returned. The entire forge bowed their heads. The silver-haired man spoke softly. I am Torin, son of the one who forged the first gear for Armand. We have waited generations for this sign. You blinked. Waited? For me? He laughed, a low, rough sound. No, for anyone brave enough to carry it out of the dark. Turns out that's you. Torin led you to the main work table. Upon it lay curved metal plates, small lenses, rotating rods, and springs the pieces of a half-built machine. We have the parts, he said. But no one had the plan to join them. Until now. You unrolled the scroll, spreading it out under the forge light. The fire's glow reflected off the ink, illuminating each precise line. Torin nodded. This is the past.So, the machine of light. The one thing the church feared most. He turned and shouted to the workers. Prepare the main axle. Use black steel, not common iron. If the light will live again, I want it to outlive us all. No one questioned him. They moved instantly, as if they'd been waiting their entire lives for this moment. Hammers struck. Sparks flew like falling stars. You stood there, barely breathing, watching the impossible take shape. The girl with the leather mask took a small hammer, tapping the glowing metal. Ever heard steel sing? She asked. You shook your head. She smiled. Then listen. The clash of metal rang out, pure and sharp, like a church bell only alive. Every strike, every spark, was a note in some ancient melody returning to life. You saw Torin bow his head over the forge, muttering something, not a prayer to God, but to the flame itself. When it's done, Torin said, a page will no longer be a sin, it will be proof. Every printed word will free a soul. You whispered. And if they find this place, he grinned. Then we'll forge more hammers. Knowledge needs defenders, not just messengers. Hours passed. They fitted gears, adjusted rods, aligned ink cylinders. You helped wiping sweat, holding lamps. Slowly, from scattered metal pieces, a small machine emerged, a box with a crank handle, topped by an engraved cylinder. When Torin grasped the handle for the final turn, everyone held their breath. "Let the light speak," he murmured, and turned it. Clack. Clack. A sheet of paper slid out, inked with a single line. "Fire can burn flesh, but never an idea." No one spoke. Only the fire crackled, and the blacksmiths breathed heavy. Then Torin placed the paper in your hands. "You're the first to see it live again in over 300 years. You stared at the words, your chest tightening. "Beautiful," you said quietly, "but a little big for a receipt." Torin roared with laughter, and the whole forge followed. "You truly are a man out of time," he said, grinning. "But maybe that's why you're the right one. We take things too seriously, but you still dare to joke with the light." He clapped your shoulder. "This machine won't print wars or power. It prints words. And that makes it the most dangerous thing of all." You looked around at the blazing eyes, the trembling, calloused hands gripping hammers. "So what about me?" you asked. Torin's voice rang firm as steel. "You take it. This is only a prototype, but it's proof that light can be born from human hands. Bring it to Aurora. They'll know what to do next." You nodded, gripping the small machine. For the first time, its weight didn't scare you. In that heaviness, there was hope. And when you stepped out of the forge, snow began to fall again, but this time, every flake glowed in the firelight behind you, as if the sky itself was being reforged. When the first gear turned, the entire forge went silent. You heard the faint click-clack, soft, yet echoing like thunder beneath the earth. A simple, almost clumsy sound, but everyone stood frozen. Torin lifted his hand from the crank, eyes wide, as if he had just heard the voice of God himself. The young blacksmith beside him pressed a hand to her chest and whispered, "It's alive." And it was the tiny gears kept spinning, the main shaft grinding against the driver rod, droplets of ink dripping onto the metal plate. A sheet of paper was placed beneath it, and then the words appeared. Black. Sharp. The scent of ink mixed with the forge's burning metal. No one breathed. Even the wind through the chimney seemed to stop, bowing to what had just happened. You stared at the words, not fully understanding them, but feeling their weight, something not made of iron or knowledge, but of humanity. Torin touched the paper, his hand trembling. "Hundreds of years. And it breathes again," he said, his voice breaking. "Armand, you did not die in vain." You smiled, trying to break the sacred stillness. "If he were alive, he'd probably want to sign a copyright." Torin let out a raspy, warm laugh. The others joined, the sound of relief after years of holding their breath. "You joke well," he said, "but you don't understand. That click-clack was the sound of freedom. It's quiet because it hasn't yet been heard, but one day the whole world will echo with it." You looked at the machine. It was no bigger than a chest crude, heavy, but within it, dozens of gears, springs, rods, all moving in perfect harmony. And when they turned, the firelight glinting off the metal made it feel like you were staring at the heart of humanity itself, beating again after centuries of sleep. The young woman came over, wiping her hands on her apron. "You know," she said softly, "my ancestors used to say, whenever they heard metal sing like that, they believed it was the soul of knowledge returning. They called it the fire of words." "And what do you call it now?" you asked. She thought for a moment, then whispered, "Hope." Torin heard and smiled, patting your shoulder. "Do you know why I said this marks a new age?" He pointed toward the forge door, where snow was quietly falling on the trees. "Because from this moment on, humanity will no longer depend on memory or word of mouth. This thing will record everything good, evil, right, wrong. It takes no sides. It only preserves." He looked at you, eyes sharp. "And that is what makes it dangerous. Once truth is printed, no one can burn it all. Even God, if he exists, can't call back the words that have escaped." You stayed silent, a mix of awe and fear rising in your chest. Outside, the wind howled, snow thickened, yet the forge light pulsed on like a heart refusing to die. Another smith brought over a small wooden plaque, carved with the word Lumen Light, and nailed it to the side of the machine. "Its name," Torin said, "no longer Pressa Lucem. We'll call it simply Lumen, because it doesn't just print knowledge, it prints light." The group bowed their heads. You felt a solemnity fill the air, like you were standing at the birth of a new world. "So what now?" you asked. "Do we keep it here?" Torin shook his head. "No, once light is kindled, it must spread. We'll make 2 more, one stays here, one goes north, one south. But this one," he looked at you, eyes deep as the forge's glow, "still belongs to you." "What?" "No, thank you," you stammered, stepping back. "I only volunteered for paper delivery, not for carrying the future." He laughed. "You sound like a man afraid of being remembered." "No," you said. "I'm afraid of being burned alive." The forge erupted in laughter. Then Torin's tone hardened. "You don't understand. Lumen needs someone to take it beyond these woods, someone who can reach Aurora. There, they'll copy it, multiply it hundreds of times. Once the first pages are printed, the church won't be able to silence them all. You're the final link." You froze. For the first time in your life, you wished you could go back to the past, or rather, the present, where the only things you carried were a phone and an ID card. But then you looked at Lumen, at the way the light shimmered across its metal surface, gleaming like a call. You said, voice shaking. "I'm not sure I'm worthy." Torin answered softly. "No one ever is. When it comes to changing the world, they just act before fear tells them not to." He placed a hand on your shoulder, eyes steady. "When that click-clack sounded, an era began. And you're standing at its very start." You swallowed hard, the weight of the world pressing down yet inside. Something else stirred. Not fear. Life. You looked down at the small machine, its gears still turning, steady, relentless, like the heartbeat of something far greater than man. "All right," you murmured. "If this is the beginning, I suppose I want to hear a few more click-clacks." Torin laughed, clapping you hard on the back. "Good. Because someday, when they write the histories, they'll say the light began with the click-clack of a man who never believed he was a hero." And in that moment, you realized that tiny sound, echoing in the snowy forest, had truly awakened a world that had long been asleep. Rumors traveled faster than royal horses, faster than the morning church bells. They said that in the northern woods, someone had built a machine that gives birth to words, a cursed device that could copy the words of the holy and rewrite the world. At first, it was only a whisper in taverns, traded between drunkards and lost hunters. But like every forbidden tale, it needed no proof, only fear. And this fear, this time, didn't wear the face of demons. It wore the face of man. People weren't afraid of the machine, they were afraid of what it represented, that knowledge could multiply. In small towns, priests climbed their pulpits, voices trembling with fury. "Whoever dares to write the words of the holy," they thundered, "writes the sins of mankind itself." The faithful below muttered their prayers, but in their eyes flickered something else, curiosity. One man whispered, "If that machine can write, could it write my name into heaven?" That question alone was more dangerous than any flame. In the city, the High Bishop heard the news, threw his chalice to the floor, the red wine splattering like blood. "A machine that makes words?" He growled. "There is nothing more dangerous than teaching the ignorant how to speak." That sentence became the decree that sparked a kingdom-wide hunt. For centuries, the church had ruled over everything, prayers, sins, even the written word. Writing was the privilege of the holy. The common people only needed to believe and obey. But now, if anyone could read, if anyone could write, they would start to ask questions. And the moment humanity asks, why, power begins to crack. In monasteries, monks exchanged silent glances. Some trembled and tore up their scriptures to prove loyalty. Others quietly copied the rumors, hiding them in drawers. They didn't dare say it, but deep down they knew. What had appeared wasn't just a machine. It was the birth of an age where knowledge no longer belonged to the few. In the forest, you still didn't know any of this. You only knew you were carrying Lumen, and with every village you passed, the stares grew sharper, more confused. Some greeted you with a smile, others crossed themselves as you walked by. A child tugged on his mother's sleeve, asking, "Is that the man who makes words fall out of metal?" The question made her cover the boy's mouth and pull him away. You pressed your lips together and walked faster. Torin had been right: when light is lit, the dark will go mad trying to snuff it out. And this darkness wasn't just night. It was the fear of an entire world. Along the road, new rumors reached you every day. Some said, "The machine writes the scriptures in the devil's tongue." Others swore, its creator made a pact with a falling star, trading his soul for knowledge. Still others claimed, a whole town was wiped out because someone printed the name of God and misspelled it. Each tale added another layer, and soon, the word-birthing machine became a legend of sin. Strange. You thought the world is always eager to worship what it doesn't understand, as long as someone tells it to be afraid. In a roadside inn, you overheard two merchants talking. "If that machine's real," one said, "it'll replace us. Who needs scribes to write contracts?" The other laughed. "No, idiot. If everyone can read, no one will need merchants at all." They both chuckled, but there was something hollow in it. As you stood to leave, an old woman whispered, "If you ever meet the one who made that thing, tell him to stop. The world has burned once before because of knowledge." You didn't answer. You just pulled your hood tighter and stepped into the cold. The sky was black and low, snow falling sideways. You felt caught between two worlds. On one side, those who feared words. On the other, those who hungered for them. And in between, you a wanderer carrying something neither could accept. That night, you stopped beneath a tree and built a small fire. Lumen lay in its cloth bag, glowing faintly as if asleep. You looked at it and whispered, "They're terrified of you, you know? They're scared of a machine that can write, scared of the idea that humans might think differently." You chuckled. "Pathetic. I'm scared of doing math, and they're scared of thinking." But the laugh faded fast. You remembered Alaric's words. If people knew knowledge could be multiplied, the church's power would crumble. Now you understood. No one needs to burn books, just plant fear in people's hearts, and the books will burn themselves. You looked up. The clouds had parted, revealing a long stretch of stars, shining like thousands of floating words. "If the world fears those who think," you murmured, "then maybe it's time I start thinking for them." The cold wind swept through, the fire trembled, and Lumen clicked softly inside its bag. The sound was small, but in the stillness of the night, it echoed like the heartbeat of a new era daring to defy the fear of mankind. That winter, the snow fell so thick they said even heaven had frozen over. You'd been running for days from village to village, never daring to sleep more than a few hours. The bishop had issued an edict to hunt down all those who spread the light of heresy. On every wall hung posters promising a reward worth a peasant's lifetime of savings. Whoever surrenders the bearer of the word-birthing machine shall be absolved of sin. And so, the entire kingdom became a trap, and you, the one carrying Lumen, were the prey in a world drunk on superstition. You heard that Alaric had been captured in the south. Some said he'd been betrayed, others swore he turned himself in to mislead the church. You didn't know which was true. But one thing was certain. He was no longer free. One night, deep in the forest, you heard bells tolling from far away, slow, steady, 13 times the number reserved for the condemned. You froze, clutching your coat, heart twisting tight. Each chime struck like a blade. "They're executing him," you whispered, but no tears came. You understood Alaric never wanted to be mourned. He wanted to be remembered. And to remember him, you had to keep going. The blacksmiths in the forest had managed to copy the blueprints before scattering. They hid them in crates of goods, inside loaves of bread, under layers of candle wax in the monks' cells, and even in the hearts of wandering minstrels. The designs of Armand and Alaric, the drawings that had cost so many lives, now had hundreds of copies drifting across the kingdom. Each one a seed, buried beneath the snow, waiting for spring to rise as fire. And you kept walking, kept hiding, still carrying the first machine, Lumen like a fragment of the world's heart in your hands. Once, you hid in an abandoned monastery. Under the moonlight, you started it again. The gears clicked, the ink dripped, and on the paper appeared a single line: "Knowledge never dies, it only changes form." You smiled and whispered back, "Yeah, and neither do the ones who carry it." Then you moved on over mountains, across rivers, through lands no map remembered. You became a living myth or a demon to those who feared the light. Some said you were captured. Others said you vanished into the snow. But no one knew that one rainy night you hid the small machine within the stone walls of an old monastery, where only the wind and time could bear witness. Decades passed. Kings rose and fell, wars raged and ended, and the story of the word-birthing machine faded into legend. Yet knowledge, as Alaric once said, never died. It merely waited for the next person to open the box. Many years later, in a small western town, there was a young goldsmith named Gutenberg. He wasn't rich, nor well-educated, but he possessed the one thing the world had once feared most: curiosity. He spent his days at a wooden desk, tinkering with small lead blocks, trying to shape letters that could print onto paper. People said he was mad that letters belonged to God, not to metal. But one day, while repairing the roof of an old church, he found a crack in the wall. Inside was a metal box, dusty, rusted, filled with fragments of paper long faded. He opened it, and inside was a drawing gears, rods, and a faint, shaky line of writing. Pressa lucem. Gutenberg didn't understand it all, but something inside him sparked. He looked at the drawing, then at his lead blocks, and whispered, "Maybe this is how light is made." No one knows where he found it, or why the idea came when it did. But a few years later, the world witnessed something it had never seen before. Pages printed in countless numbers, words multiplying like fire across Europe. Books left the hands of priests and entered the homes of the people, and a new age began. Somewhere, they said, when Gutenberg finished his press, he heard a faint click-clack, like a whisper from beneath the earth, the echo of a century past, of those who had died to preserve an idea. No one remembered your name, or Alaric's, or Armand's. History only kept the name of the man who brought light to the world. But every time a book is opened, every time a word falls from a page, people say you can hear the wind stir softly, the sound of the first gears turning in the snowy forest long ago. And somewhere in the void, Alaric is probably smiling, his rough voice echoing like that final night. "See, I told you, knowledge doesn't die. You, if you're still somewhere in the river of time, probably laugh back and mumble, 'Yeah, and I still didn't get that tax break.' But that doesn't matter anymore, because the light has spread, and the world at last has learned how to think." The printing press was born, and the world opened its eyes as if waking from a sleep that had lasted centuries. No more trembling hands copying each letter with goose feathers under dim candlelight. No more monks bent over wooden desks writing the same prayer hundreds of times. Now, gears turned, ink flowed, paper stacked, and for the first time in history, knowledge no longer belonged to the divine. The click-clack that had once made the church tremble now echoed across Europe like a symphony of awakening. The words printed were no longer confined to scripture. People began printing poetry, philosophy, science, even jokes. The world suddenly filled with laughter and arguments, because once everyone could read, everyone wanted to speak. In taverns, people passed around pamphlets mocking the one-eyed king and his blind court, a story everyone understood but no one dared to say aloud. A drunk once roared with laughter. In the old days, if you insulted the king, you'd be beheaded. Now, just print 500 copies, they won't know who to behead first. The room burst into laughter, the sound like hammers striking the press itself. Knowledge began to grow like wild grass. Schools sprouted up, and thin, cheap books were printed for the common folk. Children in villages now held learning letters with pictures instead of prayer manuals. The old friars watched them with strange eyes, half awe, half fear, because they knew, once a child learned to read, it would no longer need a priest to understand God's words. But it wasn't just holy knowledge that trembled. The nobility, those who once monopolized understanding, began to fear too. A court official once said at a banquet, "Writing used to be the crown of the wise, now the peasants wear it like straw hats." The table laughed, but in their hearts, they knew it wasn't a joke anymore. Because when knowledge spreads, power loses its shape. In a small room in Mainz, Gutenberg, the goldsmith who had once stumbled upon that old blueprint, adjusted his press. He wiped sweat from his brow, watching the sheets fall one after another. Each page carried hundreds of identical letters, perfect, even more beautiful than any hand could write. He knew he had touched something monumental, but he also knew the machine could cost him everything. "The world doesn't like change," he said to his young apprentice. "But light doesn't ask for permission before it rises." and he kept turning. The gears kept spinning, the pages kept printing, and knowledge poured out like a waterfall. In the great cities, the first bookstores opened. People crowded to buy, not only to learn, but to boast that they could read. One lady proudly said to her friend, "I own both the Holy Bible and the Merchant's Jests. One for the soul, one for the evening." People began to write more about astronomy, about the body, about politics. Some wrote, "The earth is not the center of the universe." Others wrote, "Man was not born to bow." And someone even wrote, "If we can print thought, then no thought can ever die." Those lines made readers tremble. They were no longer prayers, but challenges. The church, of course, did not stay silent. They burned books, banned printing, and called printers the hands of Satan. But they didn't understand one thing. When one book burned, 100 more were already printed. When they destroyed one idea, 10 new ones were born. Fire could no longer keep up with words. Somewhere, in a small tavern, a young man wrote on a scrap of paper, "If God gave man reason, why forbid him from using it?" He sent the manuscript to a printer. Weeks later, the entire city was reading it. Knowledge no longer stayed locked in churches. It poured into markets, taverns, and the minds of those who once thought themselves ignorant. People began to ask, to doubt, to think. And so, the most terrifying thing in human history emerged: the fear of people who could think. Because once people start thinking, they stop obeying blindly. When they can read, they no longer need someone to read for them. When they can write, they no longer need someone to speak on their behalf. An old priest, watching children read aloud in the courtyard, sighed. We taught them to pray to understand God, and now they read to understand themselves. Perhaps God has won, or perhaps he's lost. But what about you? In those first printed pages, among thousands of words, no one knew that the seed began in the hands of an unnamed wanderer fleeing through the snow. No one knew your name, or Alaric's, or Armand's. Yet every time a press turned, every gear spun, every drop of ink met paper, that same click-clack rang out, reminding the world that light doesn't come from miracles, but from courage. And so, among thick books, bold essays, and even foolish jokes about blind kings, history rewrote itself not in prayers, but in metal. The first sound of freedom. You vanished from history, as if you had never existed. No one wrote your name in manuscripts, no statue bears your face, no grave. Not even a single line mentions you in the records of the church or the scholars. You dissolved into the wind like the ashes of candles that had already done their duty. The world entered the age of knowledge, of printing, of books of words multiplied 1,000,000 times. But no one knew that once there had been someone who ran through snowy forests, who carried the first printing machine in his arms, who heard the first click-clack that began an era. Time did what it does best, erased the footprints of people, but kept the cracks they left in the world. And so, even though your name was gone, whenever someone opened a book, there was still something of you in it. The first printed lines, whether carved in wood, cast in lead, or forged in steel, all shared one strange detail that no one could explain. At the bottom of the page, tiny, like an accidental ink mark, there was a slanted handwritten line: "Light belongs only to those who dare to see." No one knew who wrote it. Some said it was Gutenberg's quote, others claimed it was from a rebellious monk, and the skeptics insisted it was probably just a drunken printer's joke. But the line kept reappearing in the first printed Bible, in "On the Revolutions of the Celestial Spheres," in the first translations of Greek philosophy, even in banned folk tales. At first, people tried to erase it, dismissing it as a printing error, but the more they erased, the more it appeared in new copies, as if an invisible hand rewrote it every time someone tried to forget. And so, "Light belongs only to those who dare to see" became a phrase claimed by no one, yet remembered by everyone. It was carved above university gates, copied into philosophers' journals, embroidered on the clothes of the illiterate who still believed in a light beyond the Sunday. They never knew that the sentence was first written on the coldest night of winter, by a fugitive sitting beside dying embers, scribbling on his last scrap of paper before burying the machine beneath the snow. That fugitive was you. You no longer lived in history books, yet history began where you disappeared. You were no longer in the songs, yet from your silence, humanity learned to speak. Every press strike, every turned page, was proof that someone once chose to save knowledge instead of saving themselves. And the world, it changed. In the centuries that followed, thanks to the press, knowledge bloomed. From it came revolutions, thinkers, and those brave enough to write what no one had dared before. And along with knowledge came rebellion, wars, and blood. Because light, though it brings understanding, also leaves darkness with nowhere to hide. Printers were executed, beheaded in public squares for printing forbidden books. They lifted their heads high, smiling, whispering one last line before they died. Light belongs only to those who dare to see. That sentence became the password of those who believed in knowledge. When the wars of thought erupted, when churches burned thousands of books in Prague, people said, someone in the crowd shouted that same line and laughed before the fire consumed him. They said he was a descendant of Alaric, or a soul out of time, but no one knew for sure. And you, if you still lived in anyone's memory, were just a shadow in legend, the one who carried light through the white night. Folklore said that every winter, if the night was quiet enough and the wind blew from the north, one could hear a faint click-clack between the falling snow, like the old gears still turning beneath the earth, reminding the world that knowledge never stops. Modern scholars laughed, saying it was just natural sound. But one mystery remained. In every surviving ancient print, no matter how damaged, no matter how faded the letters, that single line always stayed clear, unblurred, unfaded, as if printed with different ink. Ink made, perhaps, from the will of the one who wrote it. Some said it wasn't ink at all, but the mark of fire, the fire of those who burned for daring to think. Whatever it was, that line has lived longer than any scripture, any verdict, any king. The world changed. Humans reached the stars, wrote with keyboards instead of lead and hammers, yet still somewhere in the old pages your words remained, like a blessing, like a warning. Light belongs only to those who dare to see. And who knows, maybe one night, when a nameless storyteller like me sits alone in the dark, opens an old book, and reads that line again, he'll smile softly, realizing that the light you left behind never went out. It merely changed hands, changed ages, changed form, but it is still the same small flame, burning in the long night of humankind. And from that moment, the Middle Ages ended not by war, not by kings, but by a secret with no clash of swords, no bloodshed, only the faint click-clack of a rusty machine. They called it the machine of God, but in truth, it was the machine of man. It killed no one, yet it slew ignorance. It had no army, yet it overthrew an empire of fear. And it all began on one night, the night you, an unknown wanderer, unlocked the first gate, lit the first flame, and dared to believe that knowledge should not be trapped in cold stone. As the world slowly stepped out of darkness, people began to look back. The castles that once towered above all were now ruins. The cathedrals that once ruled souls were now only places for stories. The new heroes were not warriors, they were readers. The new weapons were not swords, they were words. People no longer feared speech, they learned to argue. They no longer believed knowledge belonged to heaven. They began to believe that light lived within their own eyes. In the new cities, books were sold like bread, printed faster than rumours. Those who once dared not lift their heads now read aloud in public squares. Children wrote their names on paper, women learned to count, farmers read the law. Those small acts were the death knell of the Middle Ages, the age when mankind feared knowing. Kings and lords tried to resist, issuing bans on books, on printing, but it was too late. Once an idea was printed, no fire could burn it all away. As you once said, knowledge doesn't die, it only changes form. And so, a new age was born, the age of curiosity, of self, of the question, why? The world stepped into the morning of reason, leaving behind the centuries of night. Yet strangely, no one can say exactly when that darkness ended. Historians argue, some say 1450, when Gutenberg completed his press. Others claim 1517, when Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the church door. And some insist it was when Galileo looked up at the stars. But if you ask me, I'd say it ended that night when a nameless soul pushed open the heavy wooden door of a snowbound fortress and let the first light spill in. You the one history forgot, but every age owes. Though no one remembers your face, every time a child learns to read, every time someone opens a book, every time a person asks a question, the memory of you lives again. No one can see it, but within the sound of turning pages, there is the echo of snow, of wind, of fire, and of iron gears still spinning. And among countless printed lines, one sentence remains. No one knows who wrote it, but perhaps it was you. Light belongs only to those who dare to see. That line became the will of an era, a reminder that all knowledge has a price, and that price is always courage. You paid with your name, Alaric with his life, Armand with his soul, and in return, the world gained freedom. Centuries later, they would call that time the Renaissance, the age of art, science, and humanity. But in the deepest shadows of history, some knew that every rebirth begins with quiet defiance, not from a throne, but from the heart of someone who believes knowledge should be shared. And as the stars rise in the night sky, we can imagine that somewhere among them, there is one star for you, the nameless one who dared to unlock the mind of mankind. The wind still turns the old pages, flipping through the words you left behind, and each time we read, we hear again the sound of that moment, the click-clack that began. Freedom. You disappeared, but the world you left behind was never the same. The Middle Ages died not with the clash of swords, but with the turning of gears, the printing of words, and the sound of humans reading what they once feared to say. And if you're listening to me now, somewhere in the dark, know this. In every book you once held, in every thought you once dreamed, there is still you, the one who opened the first cold vault and let the light step out. Your story ends here, but the light does not, because knowledge, once born, never sleeps again in the dark. Trouble always begins with those who believe too much in themselves, and Bellerophon was exactly that. A young man who stood like a spear, with eyes brighter than any blade under the sun, and a smile that could make even a goddess turn her head. Since childhood, Bellerophon had been called the Child of Glory. He shot arrows like Apollo, rode horses like the son of Ares, and spoke as if Athena herself had taught him how to twist his tongue. But the curse was that everyone told him he was like a god, and he believed it. I think even Zeus would want to be my friend, he once said seriously, making the nearby blacksmiths spit out their wine in laughter. An old man shook his head and said, "Boy, when a man compares himself to the gods, he's inviting lightning to knock on his door." But Bellerophon only shrugged. "If lightning knocks," he said, "I'll pour it a drink." And so those arrogant words spread across the land, and with them his fame, half admiration, half fear. He was born of noble blood, son of King Glaucus, descendant of Sisyphus, the man who once tricked death itself. Perhaps a drop of that reckless blood flowed in his veins. Bellerophon grew up surrounded by tales of heroes, where every great deed began with a challenge to fate. So, he wanted to test his own. He forged swords, rode horses, climbed mountains, drew his bow, and no one could count how many beasts he'd slain, some so large that others only dared paint them on cave walls. Each victory made his eyes shine brighter, not with righteousness, but with the light of a man who was beginning to believe he could never be wrong. At feasts, when the lyres played and storytellers spoke of Heracles or Perseus, Bellerophon would smirk. "They were just lucky," he said. "If I had Perseus's sword, I would have cut off Medusa's head in 3 heartbeats. And Heracles? He's strong, but not smart." The warriors looked at each other, half angry, half afraid. No one dared argue, because everyone knew Bellerophon could do whatever he said. But arrogance, no matter how well disguised under wine or laughter, is still a message sent to the heavens. And on Mount Olympus, where clouds coil around Zeus's throne, his laughter did not vanish into the wind. Zeus was not easily angered, but arrogance was a reason for mortals to be tested. And so, fate began to turn its wheels slowly, surely, and no one noticed. Bellerophon didn't know it yet, but the victories he was about to claim were not rewards. They were traps, woven from his own dreams. In Corinth, he was honored by all. Women adored him, men respected him, children imitated the way he held his sword. But as with every hero's tragedy, trouble began with one small mistake, a death he never meant to cause. During a royal hunt, he killed someone. Perhaps a friend, perhaps a jealous rival. Blood stained his hands, and though it was an accident, he was declared impure. No one dared look at him any more. The gods, they said, had turned their faces away. Bellerophon wandered, carrying guilt and wounded pride. He went to King Proetus of Tiryns, seeking purification. The king received him kindly, offered food and wine, but the real danger came from elsewhere, from the queen's eyes. Queen Stheneboa saw him, and from that first glance, she fell. A hero, young, beautiful, full of pride, the kind of danger that comes wrapped in human skin. But Bellerophon did not return her gaze. He honored his oath and despised weakness. She was rejected, and her love turned into poison. "He insulted me," she cried to the king. "He tried to violate me." The court was thrown into chaos. Proetus was furious, but because he had promised to protect the young man, he could not kill him. So, he wrote a letter to his father-in-law, King Iobates of Lycia, asking him to punish this guest for offending the queen. Inside the letter, hidden words read, "The bearer of this letter brings death to its receiver." Bellerophon didn't know. He carried that letter like a lamb bearing its own death sentence, believing it to be his mission of redemption. Beneath the sun, he still smiled, held his head high, believing fate had given him a chance to atone through heroism. But the gods thought otherwise. They watched, and they laughed the laughter of those who already know how the tragedy will end. Bellerophon, the man who thought himself a friend of Zeus, the man who believed glory could cleanse any sin, was walking the path the gods had drawn. A path lined with flowers, ending in an abyss. And at the end of that path, something waited the chimera, with the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and the tail of a serpent, breathing fire, devouring empires in rage. They said no one had ever faced it and lived. But Bellerophon did not fear. He heard the tales, smiled, and said, "I will ride into the sky and trample its fire." Those words spread, and the world waited to see whether it was prophecy or madness. But if history is fair, it knows that sometimes the mad are the ones who rewrite it. And so, fate set the board. The gods leaned in to watch, and Bellerophon, the man too proud for heaven, was about to step into legend, not through luck, but through his own pride. Disaster often strikes when laughter is loudest, and for Bellerophon, that feast was the beginning of every downfall. It was a night overflowing with wine, torches blazing, songs rising, and the clash of silver cups echoing like thunder. King Glaucus, his father, held a banquet to celebrate a prosperous harvest, and all of Corinth came to rejoice. Amid the light and the heat of the drink, Bellerophon, the young gifted man, became the center of every toast and every whisper of admiration. He smiled the smile of one too familiar with praise, proud, careless, radiant. That night the wine flowed like rivers, and words lost their boundary between truth and arrogance. Some cheered, others envied. A man depending on the tale, a half-brother or a political rival, rose with a mocking tone. They say Bellerophon never misses his mark, but would he dare test his aim before the gods? The crowd fell silent. Bellerophon laughed, eyes gleaming. "If a god stands before me, I'd ask if he wishes to be my friend. But if it's a demon, I'll shoot it through the heart before it speaks." The hall roared with gasps and laughter. The man gritted his teeth, drew a knife, and slammed it on the table. "Then take me for a demon." In an instant, the wine in their veins turned to fire. Bellerophon leapt to his feet, faster than thought, snatching a guard's sword. A flash of silver cut through the torchlight. When the scream rang out, when wine spilled onto stone, when laughter died into silence, Bellerophon looked down and saw his blade drenched in red. The man lay there, eyes wide open, mouth frozen mid-curse. The grand hall went still, the smell of wine, blood, and smoke mixed into one. For that moment, time itself froze. Bellerophon dropped the sword and stumbled back. I didn't mean," he stammered, but no one listened. His hands shook, and his eyes stared into the crime they held. A minister spoke softly. "Blood has been spilled, and the gods have seen." And so, the music stopped, the torches bowed, and glory shattered like a fallen cup. The next morning, before the sun reached the city walls, Bellerophon was condemned. No one wanted to hear his defense. To the Greeks, killing even by accident was an insult to the divine. A man stained with blood could not live among others, for that blood would summon misfortune. King Glaucus, his father, could not save him. He only looked at his son with heavy eyes. "My boy," he whispered, "blood cannot be washed by water, only by a journey." And so Bellerophon was sent away. He left Corinth in a black cloak, carrying no gold, only his sword and the weight in his heart. Each step cut deeper, not from the stones beneath, but from memory. In every village he passed, whispers followed. "That's the killer." Children threw stones, women shut their doors, men stared as though he were an omen. But he did not stop. He crossed forests, mountains, and rivers cold as the curses of the dead. And at night, beside dying fires, he would stare at his hands, hands that once saved lives, now marked by guilt. "Am I a weapon of fate?" he would ask the dark. "Or just a fool who couldn't master his own rage?" The wind gave no answer, only the rumble of distant thunder, as if Zeus were laughing above. After many days he reached Tiryns, the realm of King Proetus, a man known for wisdom and faith. Bellerophon knelt at the gates and prayed, "O king, I have sinned, but my sin was not born of malice, only of misfortune. Grant me a chance to wash it clean." Proetus watched him for a long while. Beneath his iron crown, his eyes reflected a proud young man, broken but unbowed. "Would you endure trial for redemption?" he asked. Bellerophon answered without hesitation, "If the gods wish me to fall, I will fall on the road to finding myself again." Proetus nodded, his gaze cold as forged steel. "Good, but sometimes the road to purity runs through fire." He ordered the guest to be housed and fed, though in his mind another plan had already begun to take shape. For fate, ever fond of repetition, had prepared its game. At the first banquet in Tiryns, Queen Stheneboea saw Bellerophon. Her eyes lingered longer than they should. He, calm and solemn as one who had lost everything, carried a kind of allure not of this world. And when a lonely heart meets a proud gaze, tragedy becomes only a matter of time. But that was for another night. That evening, Bellerophon sat alone on the palace terrace, staring at the stars. The wind carried the scent of the sea and the sound of thunder. He lifted his face and whispered, "Zeus, if you can hear me, show me the way back. I don't want to die a sinner." A flash cut across the horizon, not lightning, but an omen. Fate had answered, though never as one hopes. For the gods, as always, do not speak in words. They speak in trials. And the trial awaiting Bellerophon would be no small one. It would demand both his soul and his pride. Still, he looked up at the heavens, toward Zeus's throne, and in his eyes burned no fear, only fire. The fire of a man who believed he could bargain with destiny. Fire that would consume him, and yet make him immortal. Tiryns, the land of massive stone walls and the roar of distant waves, was where Bellerophon came, hoping to wash away his sin. The city, seen from afar, looked like a fortress rising from rock and sunlight, a place where kings were called the hands of the gods. When Bellerophon arrived, the people of Tiryns had already heard of the exiled man from Corinth, the unintentional killer, the one with fire in his eyes and hands that wielded a sword as if forged from thunder. But instead of driving him away, King Proetus opened his arms. "You are guilty," the king said, "but not cowardly. And sometimes the gods test hardest the ones they favour most." Those words made Bellerophon bow his head for the first time in months. His heart felt light. In the palace of Tiryns, he was treated as an honoured guest. He trained with the soldiers, shared stories with the courtiers, and brought new energy to the court, fierce, confident, radiant, like a sword beneath the moonlight. But as the old rule of the world goes, where there is light, there is shadow. And the shadow had a name, Stheneboea, the queen of Tiryns, whose beauty was like fire in an oil lamp, warm but ready to burn everything around it. When she first saw Bellerophon in the golden hall, he was standing by the window, sunlight falling on his hair, his face still as bronze, and his eyes that looked beyond the horizon, as if seeing the gods themselves. In that moment, her heart skipped a beat. At first it was curiosity, then admiration, then something deeper, a flame she knew she should never touch. But Stheneboea was a queen, accustomed to getting what she wanted. She feared no law, only silence. And Bellerophon, in his silence, made her desire him even more. One afternoon, when the palace echoed only with the sound of the wind along its corridors, she summoned Bellerophon, saying she wished to thank him for training the army of Tiryns. He came, respectful, kneeling. "It is an honor, my queen, to be noticed by you." She smiled, rose, and stepped closer. "I don't notice you," she said softly. "I feel you." Bellerophon froze. "My queen, I don't understand." She placed a hand on his shoulder, eyes burning like fire. "Don't lie. You do. You're just afraid." In that instant, his heart pounded not from desire, but from realizing the abyss before him. He stepped back, lowering his head. "My loyalty belongs to King Proetus," he said quietly, "and loyalty cannot be shared." She grew angry at rejection, angry at the steadiness in his gaze. "You think I'll let you insult me like this?" she whispered, voice sharp as a blade. Bellerophon said nothing. He knew that any word now would only feed the flames. So he bowed and left. But before the door could close, fate opened the next chapter of tragedy. That night, Queen Steneboa wept before the king. Her hair was disheveled, her robe torn, her voice trembling. He tried to violate me." The palace erupted. Guards stormed Bellerophon's chambers. He did not resist, he simply stood still, staring into the emptiness where everything he had just regained was lost again. "I did not do it," he said calmly. "But I know the queen's word weighs more than my truth." Proetus looked at him, eyes filled with both anger and regret. "You are my guest, and I cannot kill you, but this crime cannot be ignored." The king could not bring himself to shed the blood of a man he once admired. So he chose another way, the way the ancient Greeks used when they wished death to travel far from home. He wrote a letter, sealed it, and handed it to Bellerophon. "Take this to Lycia," he said. "Deliver it to King Iobates, my father-in-law. He will help you clear your name." Bellerophon bowed and accepted the letter, unaware that inside were the words of doom. "To the receiver of this letter kill the one who bears it, for he has defiled the honor of my queen." The next morning, Bellerophon left Tiryns. He rode through olive-shadowed roads, across sun-drenched fields, past mountains howling with wind, carrying a letter his own death sentence. Along the way, he remembered the queen's eyes, half passion, half poison. "Had I been weak," he thought, "I'd have died in her grace. But I was strong, so I'll die alone." With every step, the wind whispered in his ear, "This is the price of pride." He did not argue, for in his heart he knew it was true, he deserved the trial ahead. Not for his sin, but for his arrogance. Zeus, high above, was likely smiling, for the god of justice punishes not with thunder, but with the road itself. And the road Bellerophon walked was the path to his true fate, where he would face a monster, the heavens, and himself. When the sun sank behind the Lycian mountains, he stopped by a cliff overlooking the sea, where the crimson sunset bled into the waves. He clenched the letter in his hand and gave a bitter smile. Perhaps this is how the gods test me, by sending me straight into death's embrace. But he did not turn back. For no matter what, a true hero does not run from his path, even if it leads him straight to the underworld. And so, in the red blaze of dusk, Bellerophon's figure faded into the mist, carrying a curse written by mortal hands and a destiny carved by gods. The sun over Tiryns burned like molten gold, and Bellerophon rode out beneath its glare, the sound of hooves echoing across olive fields, carrying the letter the king had entrusted to him, a parchment he believed to be a decree of pardon, but in truth it was a sealed death sentence. "Deliver this to King Iobates himself," Proetus had said, his voice calm in a way that should have been unsettling. "He will help you cleanse your sin." Bellerophon bowed in gratitude, never noticing the faint heaviness in the king's eyes, the glint of a blade wrapped in mercy. The letter was bound in goatskin, sealed with the royal insignia, a serpent coiled around a scepter. No one was permitted to open it, not even the bearer. And so, with the faith of a man deceived, the young hero set out, carrying the key to his own damnation while believing it was the door to salvation. He passed through strange lands, misty mountains, cities where people whispered about the cursed wanderer. But still, Bellerophon walked on, for his pride had never learned to fear. "If this is the road to redemption," he murmured, "then I will see it through to the end." Each night, beside a dying fire, he would take out the letter and stare at it not to read, for he honoured the king's command, but because it was the only thing that still connected him to his old world. To him, that folded parchment was hope itself, a promise of absolution. He never knew that, at that very moment, Hermes, the messenger of Zeus, was watching him from above, smirking. "A mortal carrying death and calling it hope," the god said softly. "Admirable, or pathetic." Then he vanished into the night wind. The road to Lycia grew crueler with each day. Bellerophon crossed burning deserts, forded rivers where serpentine creatures stirred beneath the surface, and fought off southern raiders under crimson skies. Yet with each battle, he felt lighter, more alive, as if every clash of steel stripped away a piece of his guilt. Sometimes, at night, he looked up at the sky, where the constellation Pegasus shimmered. He'd heard tales that only the brave and pure could earn the creature's trust. "If I ever meet it," he whispered, "I will fly to the heavens and ask Zeus why the gods punish pride." It was the kind of foolish dream only the lonely dare to voice, and the very thing that would soon turn the wheel of fate. For Bellerophon didn't know that on Olympus the gods were indeed listening. They found amusement in mortals who spoke of soaring to heaven as if it were a casual stroll. Such defiance was the reason they loved men and the reason they destroyed them. At last, after weeks of wind and dust, Lycia rose before him, a kingdom by the sea, with white towers piercing the mist and warships resting in the harbour like sleeping beasts. Bellerophon, weary but unbowed, strode into the palace of King Iobates. The guards stopped him, demanding his name. He simply handed them the letter. "I am a messenger of King Proetus, bearing his word for the ruler of Lycia." At the sound of Proetus's name, the guards stood aside. The two kingdoms were bound by blood. Bellerophon entered the great hall. Upon the throne sat Iobates, an old man with silver hair and eyes like the sea after a storm. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am Bellerophon, son of King Glaucus of Corinth," the youth replied. "I come seeking forgiveness and justice." Iobates nodded, taking the letter but not opening it right away. In the dim light of the hall, he studied the young man before him, proud stance, steady voice, eyes clear as tempered steel. "You do not look like a criminal," he said. "Perhaps Proetus has sent me a warrior, not a sinner." "If there is any warrior who bears guilt," Bellerophon replied, "it is I. But I ask not for mercy, only a trial to prove my worth." The king smiled faintly. "A man carrying death who speaks of trials. Worthy indeed." He broke the seal, unrolled the parchment, and the smile vanished. His face went pale. His hands trembled. The words were unmistakable, written in Proetus's own hand. "The bearer of this letter has defiled the honour of the Queen of Tyrants. Punish him that my name may remain unstained." A chill ran through Iobates' bones. He looked back at the young man standing tall, unaware. "A king asked me to be his executioner," he thought. "But to kill such a one would be to kill courage itself." He stayed silent. Fate stood balanced on the edge of his hesitation, and in that fragile pause, Iobates chose another path. If the gods truly wish this man dead, he decided, let them strike him themselves. Folding the letter, he smiled. "You are weary," he said aloud. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow, I shall entrust you with a task worthy of your strength." Bellerophon bowed deeply, gratitude shining in his eyes. He had no idea how close death had passed him by, spared only by the wisdom, or perhaps cunning, of an old king. Yet mercy too can be a form of trial, for Iobates had no wish to kill him with a sword, but with destiny. If the gods truly favour you, the king thought, then let them prove it. And so, when dawn rose blazing over the Lycian sea, Bellerophon's fate turned a new page, one of monsters and fire, of thunder and legend, where a mortal would have to prove himself worthy of the myth he was destined to create. King Iobates sat in silence within the stone hall, his fingers trembling slightly over the folded letter, the handwriting of Proetus still carved into the goatskin like a blade slicing through trust. He looked up at the young man standing before him, broad-shouldered, strong-jawed, eyes clear and fearless. Bellerophon, the one who carried his own death sentence without knowing it. Kill him? The thought flickered in the king's mind. only to fade at once, for something in those eyes made him hesitate. A man who could look death in the face without flinching, could such a one truly deserve punishment? No. If the gods wanted him dead, then let the gods strike him themselves. Iobates decided, and fate smiled again. Bellerophon, he said, his voice calm though his gaze was hard as stone. You said you sought purification, didn't you? Yes, your majesty. Grant me any trial, even if it leads me to hell itself. Then I only ask that you keep your word. The king rose, walking to the great map upon the wall. His finger stopped at a region east of Lycia, a place even his guards dared not tread. Here, said Iobates, lies Mount Xanthus. Within it lives a monster, they call it the Chimera. A lion's head, a goat's body, a serpent's tail, and fire flowing through its lungs like blood through a man's heart. It has burned villages, devoured soldiers, laid waste to my lands. No one has ever returned from there. He paused, turning to Bellerophon. If you slay it, your sins will be cleansed. But if you die, he shrugged, then the gods will have rendered their judgment for me. The hall fell silent. The guards lowered their heads. They knew this was not a mission, but an execution. Yet Bellerophon did not bow. He stood tall, fire flickering in his eyes, and smiled. I accept, my king. If fate demands my life, then let me offer it in the form of a victory. The words rang out, sharp and sure, and even Iobates found himself momentarily still. He hadn't expected such words from one so young they sounded like something spoken by a general. Good, he said quietly, dismissing the courtiers with a wave. When they were alone, the king stepped closer, his tone lower. Do you understand what you are facing? Bellerophon answered, voice steady as steel. A monster. No, said Iobates. You are facing the will of the gods. The Chimera is more than a beast. It is a test. They say it was born from Zeus's darkest dream and humanity's deepest fear. The fire it breathes burns not only flesh but faith. Then I shall fight with faith, Bellerophon replied without hesitation. The king stared at him for a long while, as though trying to memorize his face. He knew that by morning he might never see it again. That night, the palace of Lycia slept in silence, but in the darkness, two souls remained awake, one burdened by worry, the other ready to die. Bellerophon sat in his small chamber, sharpening the sword that had followed him from Corinth. The steel caught the light, reflecting a face both cursed and noble. Chimera, he whispered, if you are fire, then I shall be the wind. If you are nightmare, then I shall be awakening. Beyond the window, moonlight spilled across stone roofs, and the sea wind carried the taste of salt and the whispers of fallen warriors. They seemed to call his name, urging him to join those who had dared to defy fate. At dawn, as the blood-red sun rose from the sea, Bellerophon rode from the gates of Lycia. The townspeople watched him go, some bowed, others whispered prayers, for they all knew no man had ever returned from Mount Xanthus. But he did not look back. The wind tore at his cloak, the sand swirled beneath his horse's hooves, and the rhythm of his gallop echoed through the cliffs like the drums of war. Behind him, Iobates stood atop the battlements, eyes following the rider with a heavy heart. He murmured to his guardian god, if he is the one you have chosen, show me a miracle, and if not, at least let him die like a hero. The road to Xanthus was long and harsh. Bellerophon passed through desolate villages where stone walls were charred black, the Chimera's mark burned into the earth. He saw blackened bones, toppled pillars, and the acrid scent of fire still clinging to the wind. Yet he did not stop. With every step forward, he felt the air grow hotter, as if the beast itself were breathing somewhere in the dark, waiting for him. On the mountain's peak, storm clouds twisted, and wind howled through the cliffs. Bellerophon reined his horse, eyes fixed upward where a light flickered. Not lightning, but flame, the fire from the Chimera's maw. In that moment, he felt no fear, only a strange calm, half thrill, half peace. This is where fate comes to collect its debt, he murmured, and I shall pay it standing. He gripped his sword tighter, lifting his gaze to the summit, where smoke and flame merged like the breath of gods. There, hidden within the crimson wind, the Chimera waited, and with it, not merely a battle between man and monster, but a reckoning between human pride and divine judgment. Bellerophon did not know that high on Olympus, Zeus leaned forward to watch, while Athena smiled faintly. "Now we'll see," she whispered, "whether the man who dared compare himself to gods can truly walk through fire." And so, amid smoke and thunder, the true legend began. Mount Xanthus loomed before him, heat pouring from it like the forge of Hephaestus himself. The stones beneath his feet cracked, smoke coiling through the air, and from deep within the mountain's throat, Bellerophon heard a sound, not the growl of a beast, but the voice of fire, the breath of hell itself. Sweat streamed down his face as he gripped his sword, his hand slipping on the hilt. He looked up toward the summit, a flicker of light, then a blaze, red and furious, like a second Sunday. The Chimera was awake. "Gods above," Bellerophon muttered, then laughed under his breath. "If I survive this, I'll call it the greatest barbecue disaster in history." A gust of hot wind swept across him, drying his lips and burning his skin. He gasped for air, heart pounding, and croaked, "I'm only human, not a piece of grilled meat." His voice echoed among the rocks, a desperate joke tossed into the jaws of doom, yet in that desperation, a thought sparked. If strength couldn't conquer fire, then wit must. And the first name that came to his mind was Athena, the goddess of wisdom, the one who had guided heroes who fought with their minds instead of their blades. "Athena," he whispered, "if you can hear me, show me how to win. I don't want to die a fool in the fire." He knelt, plunging his sword into the ground, bowing his head low. Smoke swirled around him like the curtain of the underworld. After a moment, the wind shifted. The heat faded, replaced by a cool breeze, strange and soft, like the breath of a spring in the desert. Bellerophon opened his eyes. Before him a gentle light spread, taking the shape of a woman beautiful, but not with mortal beauty, serene, deep, and still as a mirror lake. Her hair flowed like water through the night, glinting silver in the smoky air. "You call my name," Athena said, her voice quiet yet ringing like a bell inside his skull. "But do you deserve to hear the answer?" Bellerophon bowed lower, his forehead touching the ground. "I dare not claim to deserve," he said, "but I beg for guidance. I am stained with sin, yet I wish to cleanse it with courage." The goddess regarded him, her gaze neither harsh nor kind, only observant, the gaze of ancient intellect. "You are brave," she said, "but foolish. The fire of the Chimera is not flame a mortal can withstand. No sword can cut it, no armor can block it. If all you have is strength, you will turn to ash before you even raise your blade." Bellerophon looked up, voice hoarse yet steady. "Then teach me to use my mind. Teach me to make the fire bow." Athena smiled a faint knowing smile, like wind through olive leaves. "I will," she said, "but wisdom is a gift with a price. Those who wield it without humility are consumed by it. Do you still wish to take it?" "If the Chimera's fire doesn't burn me," he said, "then the fire of pride is worth being burned by once." Athena nodded. From the air, she drew out a bridle of gold, shining like moonlight. "This is the bridle of Pegasus, the winged horse that roams free between sky and earth. It belongs neither to gods nor men. Only those guided by wisdom may command it." Bellerophon stared, stunned. "Pegasus, I've heard the tales, but none believe it's real." "And those who don't believe in the impossible," Athena said, "will never touch the extraordinary." She placed the bridle into his hands, and in that instant he felt a surge of power flow through him like thunder, like wind, like the call of the heavens themselves. "Go to the spring of Hippocrene, on the slopes of Mount Helicon," Athena said. "Pegasus often descends there to drink. When you see it, approach gently. Do not force it. If your heart is still, it will let you ride." The light around her began to fade. Bellerophon called after her, "And when I have Pegasus, what must I do to slay the Chimera?" Athena looked back one last time, a breeze of a smile crossing her lips. "You will not kill it with fire," she said, "but with thought. Let the fire consume itself." Then she vanished, leaving only the scent of mint and a whisper in the wind. Bellerophon rose, gripping the golden bridle, a strange clarity rising in his chest, not faith, but understanding. "There are no easy roads," he murmured, smiling faintly, "but the gods never bet on fools." He turned his horse toward Helicon. As he rode, he felt unseen eyes upon him, not of enemies, but of fate itself. And far above, Athena watched, whispering to the wind, "I have given you wisdom, Bellerophon. Now we shall see whether you use it to conquer or to burn." The wind carried her words through the hills, while Bellerophon rode through the dawn like a silver arrow. The path ahead still burned with fire, but in his eyes, that fire was no longer fear. It was an invitation. Athena looked at Bellerophon, the moonlight glinting on his armour, until even the darkness seemed to draw back. Perhaps, in that moment, the goddess of wisdom herself realized something rare, that among mortals, fragile and fleeting, this was one who carried his own kind of light, the light of daring and honesty. "You beg for wisdom, yet in your eyes, I still see the flame of pride," she said softly, her voice echoing like wind through the marble columns of a temple. "Perhaps that's what makes me curious." Bellerophon bowed his head, unable to speak. Inside him churned both fear and reverence. Before him stood the goddess even Zeus himself deferred to. He didn't dare look up too long, afraid that her light might burn his soul to ash. Athena stepped closer, her grey-blue eyes like the sky before a storm, gazing deep into him. "You dare ask me to help you fight a creature born of the gods themselves. I should be angry." She paused, a faint smile curving her lips. "But instead, I am intrigued. Perhaps I too wish to see how far a mortal with dreams can go." From within her glow, she raised her hand. In the air, golden light coiled and twisted, shaping itself into form a bridle of pure gold, gleaming like sunlight trapped in metal. Each strand quivered as if alive, humming with a deep warmth like the heartbeat of a horse. "This is Xanthine, the golden bridle of the gods, forged in Hephaestus's forge from the first lightning bolt Zeus ever cast to earth. None may touch it if their heart trembles. Only one whose will is stronger than thunder and whose courage is pure as spring water can command it." Bellerophon raised his head, the light reflecting in his eyes like fire in the night. "I swear I will be worthy of this gift." "Swear to me?" Athena laughed. "No, swear to yourself." She lifted her hand, and the bridle drifted toward him, light as air, but when it touched his palms, it weighed as heavy as the sky. He staggered to one knee, teeth clenched. The bridle burned, but it did not scorch. It only tested. And when Bellerophon held it fast without flinching, Athena gave a slow nod. "You have been accepted, but remember, the horse you seek is not of men. It is the child of Poseidon, proud as the sea, free as the wind, bowing only to those it respects." Bellerophon exhaled, feeling the pulse of power travel through the reins into his veins, his heart beating faster, stronger. "Pegasus," Athena said, her eyes drifting toward the horizon, "wanders now on the peak of Helicon. It is the spirit of freedom. It obeys no one, not even the gods. But if you can tame it, you will gain wings, wings strong enough to rise above the Chimera." "Wings to touch the heavens," Bellerophon whispered. "No," Athena corrected, her tone soft but sharp as steel. "Wings to remind you you're still human." In that instant, wind swirled around them, and Athena placed her hand upon his brow. "Remember, Bellerophon, wisdom and pride walk together like thunder and lightning. One illuminates, the other kills. Use this bridle not to command, but to understand freedom." Then the goddess dissolved into light, leaving behind the faint scent of olive and the chill of the high heavens. Bellerophon stood there, the golden bridle in his grip. Its glow shimmered like starlight sliding through his fingers. He lifted his gaze toward Mount Helicon, where Pegasus waited. The mountain was draped in blue mist, its peaks wrapped in clouds like the robes of the divine. The climb was steep, perilous, but inside him a new flame kindled not the fire of arrogance but of yearning. He knew that above, amid mist and wind, was the only creature that could help him soar beyond fate. He began to climb. With every step, the bridle trembled faintly, as if guiding him. Near the summit, he heard it the sound of hooves, soft yet echoing like distant thunder. Before him spread a small meadow, and at its centre, Pegasus. The horse was white as frost, its wings vast as clouds, its mane rippling in the wind like liquid silver. Every motion made the air shiver, as though the sky itself breathed with it. Bellerophon froze. This was no beast, this was the soul of the heavens. He stepped forward slowly, carefully, holding the bridle. Pegasus watched him, eyes clear as water, cold, cautious. He stopped, saying nothing, and bowed his head. The silence stretched long, then something miraculous happened. Pegasus stepped forward once, twice, then stopped before him. Bellerophon inhaled deeply, raising the golden bridle. The light touched the horse's neck, and instead of fleeing, Pegasus stood still. He gently placed a hand on its mane, feeling the wild, powerful heartbeat beneath. "I don't wish to cage you," he whispered. "I only wish to touch the sky with you." Pegasus stared into his eyes, then bowed its head. In that heartbeat the sky trembled, and wind roared around them. Bellerophon swung onto its back, and the moment his feet touched the saddle, white wings unfurled, slicing through the air. Pegasus neighed, long and fierce, tearing the clouds apart as they rose higher than Helicon, higher than mortals ever dared to dream. Bellerophon cried out, not in fear, but in freedom. Below him, the world shrank. Before him, the sky opened endlessly. On Olympus, Athena watched and smiled. "Perhaps," she murmured, "Poseidon won't be pleased to see his pet obey a mortal, but that only makes it more entertaining." And from that moment, the tale of the rider of Pegasus was written in wind, in thunder, and in light, the beginning of a legend even the gods themselves would bow to hear. Morning on Mount Helicon blazed like a freshly forged blade. The wind curled around the cliffs, and the clouds hovered low, as if waiting to watch the spectacle about to unfold. Bellerophon stood there, hand gripping the golden bridle Athena had given him. Before him was Pegasus, the divine horse, shining like mistlight, wings spread wide, each feather glimmering silver beneath the sunday. No one had ever seen such a creature without falling to their knees, but instead of kneeling, Bellerophon only swallowed hard, his face torn between awe and unease. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice trembling, "but you're also very tall. I hate heights." Pegasus tossed its head, snorting as if mocking him. He understood. Beings of the divine, wings or not, never favoured mortals who trembled before challenge. "All right then," Bellerophon muttered, steadying himself. "You've got wings, I've got brains. Let's call it even." He approached carefully, the golden bridle gleaming in his hand. Pegasus stood still, blue eyes watching him with something that felt like a test. "Don't look at me like that," Bellerophon whispered. "I'm here to ride, not to steal." Then he leapt. In a heartbeat, his feet touched the horse's back, and his heart leapt into his throat. It felt like mounting lightning, fierce, hot, and utterly untamable. Pegasus let out a long, piercing cry, its wings slammed down, and then they flew. The wind tore at his face, the air slicing cold as steel, and Bellerophon screamed, "Pegasus! Slow down! I'm about to lose my dignity!" But Pegasus didn't listen. It flew higher, faster, each beat of its wings a challenge hurled at the heavens. Bellerophon clung tight, his hair whipped by the wind, his cloak flapping like a tattered banner. If Athena were there, she might have laughed. On Olympus, Poseidon was surely smashing his wine cup and roaring, "That mortal fool is riding my horse." But Bellerophon didn't care. He was too busy trying not to die. "Pegasus, stop. I know you love freedom, but I prefer staying in one piece." The wind swallowed his words, and the divine steed climbed even faster. The mountains below blurred, rivers turned into twisting ribbons of silver light. A flock of birds flew by, squawking and scattering, probably wondering, "Since when do humans fly?" Pegasus soared straight through the clouds, into blinding white light that stung Bellerophon's eyes. He laughed weakly. "Athena, if this is a test, you're overdoing it." But amid the madness of wind and height, something began to shift. A feeling both terrifying and euphoric. The fear of falling was swallowed by the thrill of being alive. His heartbeat matched the rhythm of Pegasus's wings. The wind was no longer an enemy but an ally. Pegasus looked back, its once wild eyes now shining with a strange warmth, as if saying, "See, this is freedom." Bellerophon burst out, laughing the laugh of a man who had forgotten he was defying fate itself. "Freedom, huh? Then show me what it really feels like." Pegasus understood. It screamed like thunder, tucked its wings, and dove. The air howled, the earth surged upward, his heart felt ready to explode. "Pegasus, I changed my mind. Please, I'm not ready to meet the underworld yet." But the horse didn't hear. It skimmed the mountain peaks, then twisted sharply, slicing across the valley, trailing a vortex of dust and wind. Bellerophon shouted, a sound caught between terror and delight. "I swear, if I survive this, I'll build you a statue, or at least a very small shrine." After several wild loops, Pegasus finally slowed. It landed in a valley, wings folding, its glow dimming softly. Bellerophon clung to its mane, trembling like a leaf. "I'm alive," he gasped, then laughed. "And I think you just scared every sin out of me." Pegasus snorted through its nose as if laughing too. He stroked its neck, his voice calmer now. "You truly are Athena's test. The goddess gave me the bridle, but not the faith. That I had to find myself." Pegasus bowed its head, then gently touched its forehead to his, not as a beast to its rider, but as a friend. The wind rose again, gentler this time. The clouds parted, letting sunlight pour over them in gold. Bellerophon looked to the sky and murmured, "Athena, you were right. Freedom isn't about riding the wind, it's about learning to balance within it." On Olympus, Athena nodded with quiet pride, while Poseidon grumbled, "That arrogant mortal rides my creature. Let's see how long he can stay on." Down on earth, Bellerophon stood beside Pegasus, both facing the distant mountains where Chimera awaited. He brushed the golden bridle, its light gleaming in his eyes. "Now, my friend," he whispered, "we have wings, we have wisdom, and we have just enough madness to challenge fate. Time to fly into the fire." Pegasus neighed, wings flaring, wind roaring, and when they took off again, the sky erupted. There was no fear left, only the cry of a hero soaring straight into legend. After enough falls to make Apollo himself cover his face and laugh, Bellerophon finally learned how to fly without screaming like a man falling off a ship. Pegasus, the divine horse with the wings of the sky, had accepted him, not just as a rider, but as a friend. From that day on, the ground was no longer Bellerophon's only home. The whole Greek sky opened wide, and each dawn, the first light of day glimmered across Pegasus's white wings, flashing like a blade slicing through the boundary between God and man. They flew over mist-covered mountains, where Mount Parnassus gleamed like a colossal jewel, over the meadows of Arcadia, where herds of goats lifted their heads and thought the gods had returned, through raging storms above the Aegean, where waves rose like walls and lightning split the heavens, but Pegasus only neighed proudly, its wings beating hard, the wind itself parting before them. Upon that back, Bellerophon was no longer an exile. He became the symbol of freedom, of courage defying fate. In the saddle, he no longer thought of guilt, or of his past, or of false accusations. Everything drifted away beneath those wings, like ashes leaving a fire. Up there, between sky and light, he was simply a man living truest to his own desire to rise, to touch what no one dared touch. "Do you see, Pegasus?" He laughed, the wind curling around his voice. "Down there are those who bow their heads, but we," Pegasus neighed in reply, "belong to no chains." They flew through clouds, where sunlight shattered into a million shards of gold, and Bellerophon stretched out his hand, letting the light glide across his skin. He laughed loud, a sound echoing through the heavens. Is this what the gods feel? No, it's more than that. It's the feeling of one who knows he's human, yet dares to fly. Below, people looked up and saw two bright shapes streaking across the sky. They thought it was Zeus and Apollo wandering, or a sign of war to come. Children sang, poets wrote verses, and soldiers swore that if they saw that figure before battle, they would no longer fear death. Bellerophon didn't know it, but his image upon Pegasus had already become legend before he ever landed. People carved their figures into temple walls, stitched them into cloaks, and told their story by the firelight. Yet amid all that glory, he never forgot Athena's words. Remember, wisdom and pride walk together. One illuminates, the other burns. Each time the wind shifted, Pegasus tilted its wings, and Bellerophon thought of that truth. Yes, the sky was freedom, but freedom always has a price. He had heard thunder, the laughter of Zeus rolling from afar, and he knew the gods were watching. Still, he did not fear. "If flying is sin," he said, "then let this sin be written in the wind." On some nights they flew over the sea, where the moonlight stretched like a silver road. Bellerophon let go of the reins, spreading his arms as if to embrace the whole sky. Pegasus didn't resist it, understood. This man, who carried both pain and pride in his heart, deserved to know what it felt like to fly without fear of falling. High above, he heard the song of sirens from afar, the wind howling through mountain passes, the crash of waves on stone all blending into an epic melody, telling the story of those who dared to go beyond their limits. They soared past Olympus, where the gods looked down. Hermes chuckled. "He flies beautifully, but look, he's forgetting those wings weren't made for men." Athena was silent, her eyes deep. "He hasn't forgotten," she said. "He's just testing how far human dreams can be carried by them." And indeed, Bellerophon didn't fly to defy. He flew to understand. With each beat of Pegasus's wings, he came closer to the answer why mankind hungers to touch the heavens, even knowing the heavens could destroy them. Once, as they passed over the Sea of Crete, a great storm rose. Lightning flashed all around, blinding white. Bellerophon didn't dodge. He shouted into the wind, "If Zeus wishes to test me, then strike. But know this, I fly not to steal the throne, but to prove that mortals can look the sky in the eye." The thunder stopped. The clouds broke apart, and Pegasus soared upward, straight into the sunlight. Beneath them, the world glowed gold. Bellerophon laughed, his laughter joining Pegasus's wild cry, echoing over mountain and sea. In that place, there was no king, no sin, no fear, only man and his dream. The two of them, a man and a horse, became the legend of the skies. No one knew where they flew to, only that whenever the clouds curled like wings, people would say, "Bellerophon and Pegasus are returning." And deep down, perhaps they never left. Because every soul who dares to believe in the impossible carries a spark of them, the first to ride the wind, to touch the sun, and to believe that freedom is worth more than immortality. From high above, Bellerophon saw the land of Lycia spread beneath the fading light like a scorched scar on the earth. Grass dead, trees turned to ash, and in the middle of that barren valley Chimera, the creature even nightmares avoided naming. Its body was that of a goat, its head a lion, its tail a serpent, and every breath it exhaled was a storm of fire. Red flames poured from its jaws, licking stone, melting iron, softening the very ground. Black smoke rose and swallowed the sky. Pegasus froze mid-air, letting out a long whinny, the kind that sounded almost human, as if to say, "We're definitely not getting paid enough for this." Bellerophon gave a dry laugh, his heart pounding. "I know, my friend, this isn't a joyride." Below them, Chimera roared. The sound wasn't just a noise, it was force, shaking the very air. Rocks cracked, winds twisted, trees tore from the ground. "What an impressive talent for destruction," Bellerophon muttered. "Pity I didn't bring a barbecue set." Pegasus banked sharply, dodging a column of fire. The light illuminated Bellerophon's face, no longer smug, but hardened with resolve. Athena said fire would destroy itself, he reminded himself, tightening his grip on the golden reins. Pegasus understood. It tilted its wings, diving in circles around the monster. Chimera lifted its heads, lion roared, goat bellowed, snake hissed, three voices blending into one unholy sound, like the gates of hell creaking open. Another blast of fire erupted, barely missing them. "I swear," Bellerophon shouted, "if I live through this, I'm never eating goat again." Pegasus flapped harder, climbing high before plunging. Chimera spun, spitting fire straight up, but Pegasus was lightning fast, cutting through the blaze, the heat singing its feathers. Bellerophon drew his sword, steel flashing. "You're not afraid of fire," he yelled, hurling his helmet aside. "Neither am I." Chimera spewed another torrent of flame. This time, Bellerophon was ready. He steered Pegasus low, skimming the ground, the sheer gust from its wings smothering the trailing fire. Flames spread through dry brush, exploding upward smoke rose, blinding the beast. In that brief cover, Bellerophon climbed, looping behind it. "Now let's go hunting!" he growled. He leaned forward, wind screaming in his ears. Pegasus dived, swift as Hermes' blade. Chimera turned, belching fire upward. The world went white-hot air stabbing like knives into their lungs. Pegasus's wing was scorched, feathers curled with smoke. "Pegasus, hold on, I trust you!" Bellerophon shouted. The winged horse neighed, pushing higher into the sky. "If fire can't kill me," Bellerophon whispered, "then I'll make it kill itself." He pulled Pegasus into a steep climb, higher than the clouds, where air thinned and the earth turned small. Below, Chimera raged, thrashing, spitting fire wildly. "My plan's insane," he said through gritted teeth, "but so am I." From the pouch at his side, he drew a long spear, its tip coated in lead. Athena had told him to bring something that melts. Now he understood why. Pegasus, one last dive. If we fail, then at least let it be the most spectacular fall in history. Pegasus neighed, wings folding tight. They plunged, a falling star tearing the sky. Wind shrieked, the world spinning. Chimera lifted its heads, jaws wide, fire surging upward. But Bellerophon didn't dodge. He leveled his spear, aiming straight down its throat. Taste the wisdom of Athena. The spear pierced through the blaze, deep into Chimera's throat. Fire met lead, the metal melted, flooding its windpipe. The monster roared, but its roar turned into a scream, then into an explosion. Bellerophon yanked Pegasus upward as the blast ripped the sky apart. Fire bloomed, lighting the whole valley. Chimera shrieked one last time, then collapsed. The ground shook, smoke swallowed everything. Circling above, Bellerophon looked down at the smoking ruin. "It's over," he gasped. "And I'm still in one piece." Pegasus snorted something like, "Let's not make this a habit." Bellerophon laughed, patting its neck. "You're right, my friend. No gold, no glory, just wind and burns." They glided in silence, watching the flames fade. From afar, the wind carried faint, singing the people of Lycia, kneeling as the smoke cleared. The name Bellerophon rolled across the land like thunder, the slayer of Chimera, the rider of Pegasus. But he didn't hear. He was looking at the sky. Inside him, there was no triumph, only a question. After flying so high, could a man ever return to the ground? Pegasus beat its wings, carrying them onward. In the distance, lightning flashed the gaze of Zeus, both impressed and warning. A mortal had conquered fire. But within that light, the seed of pride had already begun to grow. And fate, as always, was waiting for just that. That day's battle, they said, even the heavens held their breath. The ground cracked beneath Chimera's feet, while above, Bellerophon rode Pegasus through the clouds, the sunlight flashing off his silver armor like lightning. The whole world burned with fire, wind, and the sound of roaring. Chimera lifted its heads, all three of them shrieking a hymn from hell. The lion's maw spewed fire, the goat bellowed waves of heat, and the serpent's tail whipped through the air like a lash, trailing blinding smoke. Facing it, Bellerophon didn't flinch. He drew his bow. The first arrow flew like lightning, slicing through the haze and burying itself in the monster's hide. Black blood splattered, but Chimera only roared louder. Fire answered back, crashing toward him like a tidal wave. Pegasus twisted, soaring upward, dodging the inferno by a breath. Bellerophon felt the heat sear across his wrist, skin blistering, but he didn't cry out, only laughed hoarsely. "You're strong, beast, but I've met gods scarier than you." Pegasus snorted, as if agreeing, then dove. This time, Bellerophon didn't shoot. He drew a long spear, its tip capped with lead, the very weapon Athena had told him to bring. "If you want to beat fire," her voice echoed in his mind, "use its own heat." The wind screamed, the golden rain strained, and Pegasus plunged like a falling star. Chimera lifted its heads, vomiting fire that lit up the sky. "Let's see who burns first!" Bellerophon roared, hurling the spear. It cut through the blaze, straight into the monster's throat. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. Then, an explosion, like Zeus himself, hurling thunder to the earth. Fire burst backward, black smoke coiled into the sky. The ground quaked, and Chimera's final scream tore through the air. Its massive body convulsed. The lion's head roared one last time before collapsing into the sea of flame. Bellerophon pulled hard on the reins, Pegasus surging upward, its wings slicing wind so fiercely the fire broke apart into ribbons. He glanced back, nothing but ashes. Chimera, born from divine wrath to punish mankind, was now just dying embers. Bellerophon panted, sweat mixing with soot, his eyes glowing like forged steel. He couldn't believe he was alive. "We did it," he rasped, voice rough. Pegasus neighed, wings blazing in the sunset, twin silver blades cutting across the sky. Below, the flames died, leaving a trail of ash like a scar on the earth's skin. From afar, the people of Lycia came running, falling to their knees as they looked up at Bellerophon on Pegasus, framed in firelight like a god. They shouted his name, not with fear, but with faith. "Bellerophon, the slayer of Chimera." Their cries rolled across the valley, through the mountains, carried by the wind. Yet amid the roar of praise, Bellerophon only looked down at his own hands, the hands of a mortal holding the reins of a god. He didn't smile. Inside him was a strange stillness. What he had defeated wasn't just a beast of fire, it was the monster within himself. Fear, pride, and fate. "You see, Pegasus," he murmured, "I didn't win with strength but with wisdom. But I wonder, will wisdom be enough to survive among gods?" Pegasus gave no answer, only tilted its wings, gliding through the drifting smoke where sunlight broke through like glory. Far away, on Olympus, the gods watched. Hera raised an eyebrow. "A mortal killed Chimera? That's never happened before." Zeus sat in silence, gripping his scepter. He carries Athena's wisdom, a warrior's courage, and now, the wings of a god. If he knows his limits, he'll be legend. If not, he tapped his lightning bolt, he'll be a warning. Down below, Bellerophon hadn't heard fate's whisper yet. He breathed deeply, the air still heavy with smoke, but the wind swept it all away. He straightened, raised his sword, and in that moment the light struck him, the image that Greece would remember forever. The man astride Pegasus, sword raised high, standing above a sky of flame, a symbol of humanity overcoming fear, monster, and destiny itself. As he flew back toward Lycia, he saw villagers cheering, children tossing flowers, priests in prayer. But within Bellerophon, there was only a faint smile. "The gods gave me wings," he said softly, "but not a place to land." Pegasus dipped its head. In the fading light, the two of them flew toward the horizon, where sun and wind met, leaving behind a trail of burning legend, the story of the man who made fire bow. The sky that day was impossibly blue, as if Apollo himself had stopped his sun chariot just to watch what was happening below. A man riding a winged horse through the clouds, a red cloak streaming behind him, sunlight flashing off his silver armor. Bellerophon, the slayer of Chimera, returning home. Beneath him, Pegasus glided as light as wind, leaving a streak of white light trailing across the Lycia sky. The people looked up and erupted. They shouted, fell to their knees, threw flowers, and cried his name. Bellerophon, the monster slayer, the rider of Pegasus. The whole valley thundered with their voices, like waves crashing against rock. Children ran after the shining trail, arms reaching for the sky. Old men wept. Women prayed. All bore witness to something the world had never seen a mortal, not only surviving but conquering the fire of hell itself. Bellerophon looked down at them, his chest swelling with a strange mix of pride and quiet. He was not a god, yet in their eyes he had become one. Pegasus tilted its wings and landed gently in the square of Lycia, before the temple of Iobates, the very king who had sent him to his death, now hosting a feast of victory for someone else. When Pegasus's hooves touched the earth, dust burst up like thunder. The crowd surged forward and fell to their knees. A child screamed, "Look! The hero from the sky!" King Iobates stepped out from the hall, hair dishevelled, face pale as ash. He froze when he saw Bellerophon, stammering, You're not dead?" Bellerophon dismounted, removed his helmet, and smiled faint but proud. "Your Majesty, I met the Chimera, and—" Iobates swallowed hard, glancing around, half expecting a ghost come to claim him. "It's resting now," said Bellerophon evenly, "in the ashes of its own fire." The square went silent. Only the wind through the temple eaves and the soft rustle of Pegasus's wings broke the stillness. Then the sound swelled again, louder than before. Cheers, cries, songs. People rushed forward, tossing flowers, singing praise. "Our hero! The one who brought light back from hell!" Iobates forced a smile, though his lips trembled. Inside him raged a storm, fear and awe twisted together. The man he'd condemned to die had returned as legend. He stepped closer, awkwardly placing a hand on Bellerophon's shoulder. "You have done the impossible. Remarkable. Thank you, Your Majesty," Bellerophon replied calmly. "I only did what the gods taught me." "The gods?" Iobates chuckled nervously. "Perhaps they truly did choose you." Bellerophon said nothing, eyes distant. He knew the gods had not chosen him to bless, but to test. And sometimes, the hardest trial isn't in battle, it's when the world starts worshipping you like a god. That night, the city blazed with celebration. Thousands of torches lit the streets, wine flowed like rivers, songs echoed till dawn. Children wore garlands, youths danced around a stone carving of Bellerophon on Pegasus, and priests offered gifts to Athena for saving Lycia. Above them, Bellerophon sat on the temple steps, cloak fluttering in the breeze, gazing at the sea of faces below. Some brought him gold, weapons, even women. He only shook his head. "I need no trophies," he said softly. "I already have what no one can give, the wings of freedom." The people didn't understand, only bowed deeper. But far away on Olympus, Athena smiled. "You understand, Bellerophon, but how long will you remember it?" At the banquet, Iobates never took his eyes off him. The king laughed, raised his cup and declared, "From this day, Bellerophon is no longer a guest but one of Lycia. You shall be my general, my son." The crowd roared, but in Bellerophon's eyes flickered something not joy, but emptiness. He bowed in gratitude, yet his gaze drifted upward to the night sky, where Pegasus stood on a cliff, wings half open, staring at the stars. Moonlight shimmered across those wings, dazzling white. "You want to fly again, don't you?" he whispered. Pegasus dipped its head, as if to say yes. Bellerophon smiled sadly. "So do I." Below, the city was alive with laughter, song, and praise, a triumphal chorus. But inside Bellerophon, there was only wind. "I once touched the sky," he thought, "and now I'm chained here, wrapped in applause. The sweetest prison is glory." Pegasus neighed softly, wings trembling. Bellerophon looked up at the heavens and murmured, "Athena, if wisdom is fire, then glory is oil. I only pray I don't let it burn me." From far above, the wind from Olympus sighed through the stars. That night, they danced and sang of the hero who slew the beast. None knew that at that very moment, inside that hero's heart, the seed of tragedy was sprouting. The tragedy of a man who flew too close to the sun and forgot his wings were borrowed. The next morning, sunlight poured through the stone arches of Lycia like rivers of gold spilling onto the earth. Flags fluttered across the city, drums thundered, and the people buzzed as if it were a festival for the gods. Bellerophon, the man who yesterday was branded a condemned criminal, now rode Pegasus at the head of a grand procession. His crimson cloak rippled in the wind, his bronze helmet gleamed beneath the sun, and from afar he looked no different from Apollo himself descending to earth. On the palace balcony, King Iobates watched, his face caught between disbelief and a forced smile. He could hardly comprehend it. The man he had sent to die was now the hero his entire kingdom worshipped. But within the cheers, he realized something: Bellerophon could not be killed. Not because of fear, but because killing him now would mean killing the people's faith. "The gods do enjoy their little jokes," Iobates sighed, turning to his advisor. "If we cannot bury a legend, we must stand beside it." He stepped out into the square. The drums fell silent. The crowd hushed. Iobates raised his hand, his voice echoing like thunder. "Bellerophon, son of man, slayer of the Chimera, from this day, stand as my equal, be the hero of Lycia." The crowd erupted. Flowers filled the air. Music roared. Bellerophon bowed his head, but there was a strange glint in his eyes, not pride, but a knowing smile. "Your Majesty," he said, "I only did what the gods and my conscience commanded. If the people are happy, that is reward enough." Iobates laughed, clapping his shoulder, though his hand trembled. The people are not merely happy, they worship you, and Lycia needs a symbol. He turned toward the palace, raising his arm. From this day, I shall not only call you hero, but my son-in-law. The square went still for a heartbeat, then exploded with cheers again, louder than before. Some even fell to their knees, believing this to be a divine union between mortal and God. And Bellerophon? He simply stood there, stunned, then chuckled softly. The gods truly have a sense of humour. From the window above, Princess Philono, the bride to be watched, her cheeks flushed. She had heard tales of the hero who rode Pegasus, but never dreamed he would one day be her betrothed. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment. No words, only a mix of respect and quiet confusion. Meanwhile, somewhere far away, in a corner of Tiryns, the former queen, the same woman whose desire had once doomed him, was surely burning just a little. News of the wedding spread fast, and she must have been throwing things or biting her veil in rage upon hearing that the man she tried to destroy now lived, married a princess, and was loved by gods themselves. "You rejected me to wed another?" She must have screamed, while far away, Bellerophon laughed under his breath. "I didn't reject you, I just chose to survive." The wedding was grand beyond words. Neighbouring kingdoms sent gifts, emissaries brought blessings, and even old enemies of Lycia bowed before Bellerophon's renown. Pegasus was adorned with olive garlands, and stood proudly beside the temple. When Bellerophon climbed the marble steps, the people shouted as one, "Hero of the sky, the chosen of the gods." He raised his hand, light pouring over him, and for a moment every gaze lifted toward him as if to a saviour. Iobates smiled, satisfied, whispering to his aide, "Now he belongs to me. A hero in the house is better than a legend at the gates." But Iobates forgot one truth: heroes never belong to anyone. On the wedding night, the wind swept through the palace, carrying the distant cry of Pegasus from the courtyard. Bellerophon sat by the window, not drunk on wine, staring up at the sea of stars. "I have everything," he murmured. "Gold, glory, love, and the adoration of all. So why do I still feel empty?" Philono approached softly. "You're still thinking of Chimera?" He shook his head. "No, I'm thinking of the sky." "The sky?" she asked, puzzled. "You've already touched it." Bellerophon smiled faintly. "Touched it, but couldn't stay. That's the pain of those who learn to fly." Far above, Athena looked down, her eyes filled with pride and worry. She knew too well after every great victory comes a deep abyss that mortals rarely see. And within Bellerophon's heart, beneath the glow of triumph and the songs of praise, a small crack had already formed, the crack of a man beginning to believe he might stand beside the gods. That night, Lycia celebrated till dawn fireworks, wine, drums rolling like thunder. But among all the laughter, only one man didn't smile completely. The one who once rode Pegasus through fire now found that the wind no longer felt free. For when glory wraps its arms around you, even the wings of heroes begin to grow heavy. And somewhere within the wind, Athena whispered, "You defeated Chimera, Bellerophon, but can you defeat yourself?" Since the day he defeated Chimera, the name Bellerophon spread across every road of Greece like a wind no one could stop. Children sang his name in nursery rhymes, poets carved his image riding Pegasus on clay vases, and warriors painted his likeness on their shields as a sacred emblem. Everywhere, people lit incense and offered gifts to the hero of the sky, worshipping him like a demigod. Sometimes, praise is the gentlest fire and the most dangerous. At first, Bellerophon only smiled when he heard his name shouted in the streets. But as time passed, that smile began to carry a shadow of pride. He started to think, perhaps the gods truly chose me not just as their instrument, but as their successor. Slowly, in Bellerophon's eyes, the earth grew small, and the sky, the place he once looked upon with reverence, now seemed like a home awaiting its rightful master. Iobates named him Supreme General, and built his statue in the grand square of Lycia. Neighbouring kings came to offer peace and tribute, and priests lifted their hands to ask him for rain and good harvests. "I am only a man," he once said. But every time he saw crowds kneel at his feet, those words grew fainter. One night, during a ceremony to honour Athena, Bellerophon stood in the temple as incense smoke swirled around him. The priests sang praises to the goddess, but the people outside were chanting his name. And amid that chorus, a thought flickered. Why should they sing for Athena, when it is I they see? The gods may be distant, but I am here. At that very moment, Athena, from the heights of Olympus, looked down, her gaze heavy as storm clouds. She wasn't angry, only filled with a quiet sorrow. I gave you wisdom to see far, she whispered into the wind, but you use it only to look at yourself. Down below, Bellerophon didn't hear. He began to wear cloaks embroidered with silver wings, his chest marked with symbols of lightning and wind, the signs of the divine. The soldiers called him the man of Olympus, and he did not deny it. At feasts, when the firelight flickered across the stone walls, he retold the story of Chimera, his voice proud, his tones swelling with self-assurance. I feared no fire. I rode the wind. I flew higher than any mortal should. A young soldier once asked, eyes wide with admiration, "Do you think Lord Zeus helped you?" Bellerophon laughed, raising his cup. "If Zeus had helped me, I'd be a god by now." The hall fell silent. Some looked around, unsure whether to laugh or bow. But to Bellerophon, it was only a joke, at least, in the beginning. That night, he stood at his window, gazing up at the stars, countless, glittering, like the eyes of the gods themselves. Pegasus rested in the courtyard, wings folded, the moonlight coating its body like silver silk. Bellerophon stroked its mane and spoke softly. "My friend, you and I have flown through fire, through clouds, through storms. We've done what even gods marveled at, so why shouldn't we go where they are?" Pegasus tossed its head, exhaling sharply, eyes glinting with unease. It seemed to understand what its master refused to the sky was freedom, but Olympus was not for mortals. "Athena once said wisdom and pride are two flames," Bellerophon murmured. "Perhaps I was born to burn in both." The next morning, he ordered sculptors to build a small temple, one not for any god, but for himself. The carvings showed him riding Pegasus between two layers of cloud. "It's not for worship," he said, "but to remind mankind that one person can touch the sky." The news spread quickly. Some worshippers began lighting incense before his statue, praying for blessings from the chosen of the gods. Those prayers, instead of humbling him, only deepened his conviction that he was truly stepping into immortality. Athena watched again, and this time her voice carried no regret, only sorrow. "You seek to stand among the gods, Bellerophon," she said, "but gods stand above not for power but for responsibility. You crave worship, yet you've forgotten that virtue lies not in being adored." On Olympus, Zeus looked down, his gaze as heavy as stone. "That is the nature of mortals," he told Hera. "I give them victory, they demand glory. I give them glory, they demand godhood." Hera smirked. "Then they'll learn the oldest lesson, that their wings are made of wax." Below, Bellerophon heard none of it. He stood before his new temple, watching the statue in the sunset's glow. "Perhaps," he whispered, "Athena gave me wings not to fly, but to climb to where I truly belong." The wind rose, Pegasus neighed, a sound like a warning. But Bellerophon only smiled, eyes fixed on distant Olympus, where white clouds swirled like thrones of light. "Wait for me, gods," he said. "I'm coming not to beg, but to sit beside you." And from that moment, the skies over Greece began to change colour, not from clouds, but from the pride of a man about to fly beyond his fate. That morning, the sky was so blue it felt like the entire world was clearing a path for someone about to reach the impossible. On the peak of Helicon, Bellerophon stood tall, proud, his gaze fixed on the white clouds, while Pegasus beside him pawed at the ground, clearly not approving of whatever was coming next. The wind blew softly, but it carried a strange chill, as if the gods themselves were watching. "What are you thinking, my friend?" Bellerophon stroked Pegasus's mane, his voice full of confidence. "I've flown through storms, slain monsters, been blessed by Athena, praised by kings. There's only one step left, the final step to reach Olympus." Pegasus turned its head, those deep blue eyes filled with worry. The horse neighed softly, nudging his shoulder, as if to say, "Hey, maybe don't climb too high, the divine wind might blow you away." Bellerophon laughed, his voice half proud, half playful. Don't worry, I have a good relationship with Zeus. The words echoed through the air, a challenge to the thunder itself. Pegasus stamped its hoof, flapped its wings once, and dust rose around them. It neighed loudly, almost pleading. He understood Pegasus was warning him. Since the day Athena gave him the golden bridle, the winged horse had always been more than a mount. It was his guide, its instincts sharper than any prophecy. It could sense when the wind turned, when the gods stirred. And now, every sign screamed danger. The sky seemed unnaturally still. Clouds thickened, light drained from the heavens. But Bellerophon didn't notice. He climbed onto Pegasus, tightened his grip on the reins, and his eyes blazed. Athena once said, "Wisdom and pride are two flames. Then let me light the final one, the flame of godhood in a mortal heart." Pegasus exhaled. A long, weary sigh, the sigh of a creature that once knew what it meant to fly too close to the Sunday. There was no stopping him now. When a mortal believes himself immortal, even the council of gods becomes just the whisper of wind. "Up we go," Bellerophon said. "Let's show Olympus how high a man can fly." Pegasus spread its silver wings. With one mighty stroke, it hurled dust and pebbles into the air, shaking the earth itself. Each beat of its wings shattered the distance between man and sky. They rose through mist, through clouds, through the layers of air only gods dared to touch. Below them, the world shrank. Cities, fields, rivers, all fading into a soft blur. "See, Pegasus?" he shouted into the wind. "I told you Zeus won't be angry. I'm the sun the sky's been waiting for." But Pegasus didn't neigh back. It felt the wind shift, a cold gust pressing down, heavy as the breath of anger. The clouds darkened from white to grey, then to a stormy violet. Bellerophon kept smiling, the blind grin of a man flying too close to the Sunday. "We're almost there," he said. "Just a little higher, and I'll see the throne of Zeus." Pegasus suddenly faltered, wings twitching mid-air. It neighed loudly, eyes wide with panic, trying to turn back. But Bellerophon yanked the reins, his voice commanding, "Forward! I fear no gods." Lightning flickered in the distance. Thunder rolled. On Olympus, Zeus opened his eyes. From his throne burst light white blue and violent thunder curling around his hand. Hera turned to him, her tone cold. "Will you let him continue? He's forgotten who he is." Zeus gazed down, his face unangered yet grave as stone. "Every mortal must learn this lesson," he said slowly. "And it is a lesson written only in thunder." Below, Bellerophon was still laughing, though the wind tore at his armor like knives. "Zeus! I come to greet you, not to defy you. Look upon me as one worthy to stand among you." A thunderclap answered, shaking the sky. Pegasus jerked violently. "The divine wind rises only when Olympus warns," Athena had once said. But that warning was long lost in memory. Pegasus fought to descend, wings trembling, but Bellerophon pulled harder, shouting into the storm, "I will not turn back! I've flown too high to fall now." His words echoed through the clouds, mixing with thunder, sealing his fate. Above, Zeus lifted his arm. A bolt of lightning ripped open the heavens, a blinding spear of white fury. Pegasus swerved just in time, but the lightning grazed one wing, searing its feathers. The smell of burnt air filled the storm. Pegasus cried out in pain, but still it flew. Bellerophon saw the smoke rising from its wing, his eyes wide, not with fear, but disbelief. "Why? I'm the chosen of the gods." No answer came. Only thunder, wind, and a voice that wasn't sound but truth itself. "You are of the earth, Bellerophon, and the earth is where you belong." Pegasus tilted, stumbling in the storm, the wind roaring like a beast. Bellerophon clutched the reins, but certainty was slipping through his hands. The golden bridle of Athena, once a symbol of wisdom, now hung heavy as chains. Pegasus fought to stay aloft, but the storm grew wild, thunder crashing, and Zeus, his eyes like steel, hurled one final bolt. The sky exploded in light dazzling, absolute. In that moment, Bellerophon felt both the glory and the cruelty of divinity. "I only wanted to touch the sky," he whispered. "Is that such a sin?" Behind him, Pegasus gave one last cry as if saying, "Told you, the divine wind blows hard." Then came the thunderclap that ended everything. The clouds ripped apart, the world drowned in white, and man and horse vanished into the storm, leaving behind only Bellerophon's final words, half proud, half broken. "Don't worry, I have a good relationship with Zeus." But on Olympus, Zeus quietly set down his lightning bolt and murmured, "And now, you truly do." That day, the sky was heavy with omen, dark clouds curling around the peak of Olympus, lightning flashing like the furious eyes of the gods. But amid the brewing storm, a single light was rising. Bellerophon, astride Pegasus, the silver wings slicing through the wind, cutting across the dense veil of clouds. The flashes of lightning danced across his armor, making his whole body blaze like one born from fire. He didn't look back, nor did he hear Pegasus's last, desperate plea. There was only one thought in his mind. "I will reach Olympus. I will sit among the gods." Beneath Pegasus's wings, thunder roared, and the wind lashed like whips. The air grew thin and cold, every breath heavier than the last. But Bellerophon's eyes burned bright. "Do you see it, Pegasus?" he shouted against the storm. "We've flown past every limit of mortals. They say no one may reach Olympus, but I will prove them wrong." Pegasus neighed, wings trembling, as if to say, "No one defies the sky and still finds their way back." But Bellerophon didn't listen. The winged horse pushed harder, slicing through the final wall of clouds, and then came the blinding light. They had crossed the boundary between the realm of man and the domain of the divine. Above them, the sky opened wide, clear and golden, lit by an eternal radiance. Towering marble columns of cloud rose high, and at their heart the great hall of Olympus, home of the immortals. The gods were gathered. On the highest throne sat Zeus, lightning scepter in hand, surrounded by Hera, Athena, Apollo, Poseidon, and the others. When the gates of wind swung open, every divine gaze turned outward. A figure appeared, framed by the radiance Bellerophon, riding Pegasus, his armor shining like the Sunday. The hall fell silent. The thunder ceased. Not even the wind dared move. Only the steady, proud beat of wings filled the air. Zeus leaned his chin on his hand and sighed. Another mortal. Athena looked down, sorrow flickering in her eyes. "Father," she said softly, "he was once blessed by me. He slew the Chimera and saved mankind. But now," Zeus interrupted, his voice rolling like thunder, "now he's forgotten that he's still just a man." Below, Bellerophon landed in the center of the great hall, raising his head. Before him stood the very gods mortals had prayed to for ages. But he did not kneel. He stood tall, eyes fixed on Zeus. "O immortals," he said, his voice ringing like bronze, "I have not come to beg. I have come because I have proven that man can reach this place not by magic, but by will. If I can fight like the gods, fly like the gods, then why should I not stand beside them?" A ripple of silence swept across the room. Hera chuckled a laugh as cold as a blade leaving its sheath. "He speaks as if there's an empty seat at our table." Poseidon roared. "My horse Pegasus brings a rebel to Olympus? You ride what's mine, with Athena's golden bridle, a gift of the gods, and dare to demand our thrones?" Athena stayed silent, but worry shadowed her eyes. "Bellerophon," she said gently, "you've flown too high. Land while your wings are still whole." But Bellerophon only smiled. "My lady, it was you who taught me to use my mind to defy fate. Tell me, what am I doing now that's any different?" Zeus rose. Thunder rolled around his throne. Each step he took made the air tremble. "You think Olympus is a place for those who defy fate?" Bellerophon did not flinch. "I think Olympus is for those who are worthy." The words echoed so loud even the wind seemed to pause. In that moment, Bellerophon was no longer human, but the embodiment of pure ambition, the kind of flame even gods feared. Zeus raised his scepter, lightning sparking in his grasp. "You are brave, Bellerophon," he said, "but courage and arrogance are only a heartbeat apart." The light above Olympus turned deep violet, clouds rolling like storm-tossed seas. Hera rose, her hand slicing the air, sending cold winds spiraling through the hall. "Show him, Zeus," she said. "Show him the difference between one who looks to the sky and one who thinks he is the sky." Athena opened her mouth to speak, but Zeus had already lifted his hand. Thunder gathered around his scepter, the hiss of power filling the air. Bellerophon raised his arm, his eyes blazing. If the gods fear mankind, then they are no gods at all. Zeus roared, and lightning struck. A bolt of white fire engulfed Olympus, Pegasus screaming in agony. Everything vanished into blinding light. When it cleared, only fragments of thunder drifted in the air, and a single figure was falling. Bellerophon and Pegasus, plummeting from the heavens like a comet hurled to the earth. The gods watched in silence. Only Athena bowed her head and whispered, "I taught you to fly, but never to stop." Zeus returned to his throne, his voice deep as rain on stone. "Mortals may touch the sky, but Olympus will never be their home. Those who try must learn that at the cost of themselves." Below, Bellerophon tumbled through the clouds, the wind screaming past, the light fading from his eyes. He understood, but far too late. Pegasus struggled to spread its wings, but the feathers were scorched. Through the fall, Bellerophon laughed softly, the sound torn apart by the storm. "At least I saw the throne for myself." And then their shadows disappeared into the grey clouds, leaving the heavens still and a legend behind. The man who dared challenge the gods, who flew to where only immortals dared to sit. The moment the thunder faded, the whole sky seemed to hold its breath. The gods of Olympus still watched the streak of light cutting through the clouds where Bellerophon, astride Pegasus, was falling, yet still struggling to regain control within the storm of the divine. The wind spun into a vortex. Thunder rolled away into the distance, leaving only the faint glow of anger in Zeus's eyes. He sat back on his throne, fingers tightening around the scepter, his arm muscles tense like coils of lightning. "Mortals," he growled softly, "always think that wings alone make them gods." Hera stood beside him, a cold smile curving her lips. "Then teach him what happens when those wings are taken away." Athena said nothing, her gaze pleading, but Zeus had already raised his hand. From the base of his throne, a tiny creature took flight, barely visible to mortal eyes. A small black fly, no larger than a grain of dust, yet carrying the command of thunder. "Go," said Zeus. "No lightning, no storm. Use your smallness to humble the one who thought himself great." The fly spun once, shimmered faintly, then vanished into the air, diving toward the struggling Pegasus below. Down there, Bellerophon still gripped the golden bridle, his face slick with sweat, the fire in his eyes still burning. "Pegasus, hold on." "My friend," he shouted, "we haven't lost yet. I won't fall to a god's anger." Pegasus panted heavily, his silver wings scorched and torn, feathers scattering like shattered stars. Yet he kept flying, every beat of his wings tearing at fate itself. Bellerophon leaned close, whispering to the horse's ear, "We've beaten Chimera, we've outlasted every storm. Just a little more, and we'll land atop that peak, and they'll see that mankind doesn't always bow its head." But at that moment, the fly had arrived. It made no sound, no flash, only a tiny sting at the base of Pegasus's neck. Small enough that no mortal would notice, but for a creature born of Poseidon's sea and Athena's craft, that sting was like fire through its nerves. Pegasus shrieked, eyes wide and white, wings jerking violently. "Pegasus, easy!" Bellerophon cried, but the words were swallowed by the wind. The divine horse reared, twisting in panic. The golden bridle pulled tight around Bellerophon's arm, whipping him through the air. "Pegasus!" "It's me." "Calm down," he shouted, but it was useless. The fly circled once and vanished into the storm, its mission complete. Zeus looked down without a word. There was no triumph in his face, only the weary sorrow of a god who had seen too many mortal dreams shatter against the sky. Below, Pegasus screamed, thrashing as pain coursed through his body. His wings tilted, eyes blazing, and in his frenzy he snapped the reins from Bellerophon's grasp. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Their eyes met man and horse, a single moment that stretched into eternity. Bellerophon managed to whisper one word, "Sorry." Then the bridle broke. He fell. Pegasus lunged, wings spreading wide to catch him, but the agony from the fly's sting sent another spasm through his body. He veered off, spiraling away. Bellerophon tumbled through the air, arms flailing as the wind tore at him. Athena's golden bridle slipped from his hand, spinning beside him, catching one last glint of light before vanishing into the clouds below. "No!" he he cried, his voice shredded by the wind. The sky erupted with thunder not from Zeus's wrath, but as if nature itself was mourning the fall of human pride. Bellerophon plunged through the clouds, Olympus shrinking above him, the gods watching like distant, unfeeling stars. "I only wanted to reach it," he murmured, "to prove that mankind could fly." But no one heard him. Only the wind, only the thunder. Above, Zeus nodded slightly. "Teach him the lesson, but let him live," he said. "Death is too merciful. Let him understand not all wings belong to the sky." Athena closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek, blending with the rain. Hera chuckled softly. "A small lesson," she said, "but a worthy one." Below, Pegasus finally steadied himself too late. He dove after his foolish friend, wings tattered, bleeding light into the storm. The world beneath them blurred rivers, cities, mountains, all shrinking into a grey-blue haze. Bellerophon kept falling, no longer screaming, only silent. In his mind, he heard Athena's voice echo, distant as memory. "You could have flown with wisdom, but you chose pride, and pride has no wings." A final gust tore through the air. Bellerophon closed his eyes, the wind roaring past his ears, cold as the laughter of fate. Above, Pegasus turned, wings broken, and let out a cry that cut through thunder, a sound both sorrowful and magnificent, the song of a creature witnessing the fall of a legend. Then, silence. The sky grew still once more. Only Zeus looked down, his gaze deep as the void. "A fly," he murmured, "sometimes teaches what lightning never can." The wind howled through the cliffs, carrying with it the sound of something ancient, a scream buried beneath time. In the cold land of Arcadia, a body lay motionless among the stones and ash. It was Bellerophon, the man who once rode Pegasus to touch the sky, the man who made even Olympus turn its gaze. But now his proud wings were broken, his silver armour torn apart, and the fire that once burned in his eyes was nothing more than a dull flicker beneath the dying rain. He wasn't dead. Perhaps Zeus had kept his word not to kill, but to let him live, a punishment far crueler than death. When he opened his eyes, he saw nothing but clouds and the cold earth. His legs no longer moved. Every breath was pain. He tried to laugh, but blood slipped from his lips. "I'm still alive," he whispered. "Zeus really does keep his promises." Days passed, and no one knew where Bellerophon was. Down in the valley, people sometimes heard the wind echoing from the mountain's peak like someone talking to themselves. Some claimed they'd seen him wandering through the mist, leaning on a staff, his eyes holding the reflection of a fallen sky. No glory, no triumph, only a man, thin, silent, haunted by the memory of wings. Each morning, he would sit on a rock facing east, toward the rising sun, the path where Pegasus once flew. "Are you still there, my friend?" he'd ask. The wind would answer with a faint whisper through the stones. He'd smile. "I knew it. You're still flying. I just can't see you anymore." At night, when fog blanketed the valley, he'd light a small fire and stare into the coals, red like Chimera's eyes long ago. "I killed the monster," he said, "but lost to myself." Many nights, he spoke to the wind, the earth, the shadow of Pegasus cast by the moon. "Are you angry with me, Pegasus?" he whispered. "You told me not to fly too high. You were right, but I don't regret it, because at least I saw Olympus." The wind passed, soft as the touch of a horse's mane. He smiled, tired but gentle. They say that when the first rains fall in that land, you can see a figure limping along the ridge, head tilted toward the sky, reaching for something invisible. The villagers call him the man who talks to the wind. Children laugh at the story. The old ones do not. They know it's not madness, it's repentance. Years went by. Forests grew around where he lived. Bellerophon's hair turned white, his face etched with the scars of time and regret. Yet his eyes still held light, not the blaze of pride, but the calm of understanding. One day, a traveller climbed the mountain and stumbled upon a small hut among the clouds. There, an old man sat at the door, holding a frayed golden bridle, staring into the distance. "Who are you?" the traveller asked. The old man smiled, his voice rough as shifting stone. "I used to be someone who could fly." The traveller chuckled, thinking him mad. But as he left, he heard the old man murmur softly, Don't look up for too long, the sky isn't meant for men." Then the old man turned back to the horizon, where the white clouds drifted like memories. Sometimes he could still hear a distant neigh faint, far away, as if from another age. "You're still flying," he said, "and I'm still watching." Time passed, and no one knew when he died. When people returned to that place, they found only an empty hut, a broken walking stick, and carved into the cliffside, a single line: "When I touched the sky, I lost the earth. When I fell to earth, I finally understood the sky." Centuries later, travelers still visit that mountain. They say that when the wind sweeps over the slopes, you can hear a whisper carried within it a message. Don't fly to become a god, fly to remember that humans can dream. Somewhere, Pegasus still flies, his shadow gliding across the clouds, wings of silver glinting in the light. Perhaps he's still searching for the one who once dared to dream beside him. And Bellerophon, the man who challenged the heavens, has become part of the wind itself. A legend no longer bound to temples or scrolls, but to the sigh of the mountains and the whisper of the clouds. He no longer flies, yet his story still does, soaring through the centuries like both a warning and a triumph of the human spirit. That there was once someone who fell, but fell from a height only the gods had ever seen. Across the Greek night sky, when the winds had ceased their howling and the thunder fell silent, Zeus stood at the edge of Olympus, his eyes gazing toward the horizon where the clouds had just dispersed. Bellerophon, the one who had dared to challenge the gods, had fallen back to earth, leaving behind only a memory. But Pegasus, the faithful divine horse, was still lost among the heavens, his wings torn, his body scorched by the sacred lightning. He still flew, still fought against the furious wind, still turned his head to look down toward the place where his friend had fallen. No reins, no commands, only the heartbeat of a creature that once carried all of humanity's pride upon its back. Zeus saw everything. He said nothing, only raised his hand, and light from his scepter spread outward like a waking constellation. "Pegasus," Zeus's voice echoed through the heavens, part decree, part hymn, "you have remained loyal, even though the one you carried forgot his limits. You are the symbol of freedom, not arrogance, of strength, but also of devotion. The gods will not punish you, for you have committed no sin." Pegasus turned his head, his eyes glowing with a soft light, as if understanding the voice of the highest god. He did not answer. He simply spread his wings once more, pushing higher, through layers of cloud where there was no more wind, no more storm. Every beat of his wings was the pulse of a pure soul. The other gods watched. Athena bowed her head, the wind brushing through her hair like a blessing. "Pegasus," she whispered, "I once gave you the golden bridle, now I give you the entire sky." Apollo plucked his lyre, and a note rang out, resonating across all of heaven. Hera said nothing, but even in her cold eyes, there was a glint of respect. Pegasus soared higher, beyond the air, beyond the clouds, into the shimmering void between the stars. And there, Zeus lifted his hand and drew a circle of light across the night. "From this day forward," he said, "Pegasus shall no longer belong to man or to any warrior. You will be the light that guides, the banner of freedom and pride. When mortals look up to the sky, they will see you, and remember that one flies not to conquer, but to understand the worth of the heavens." The radiance expanded, wrapping around Pegasus. His wings began to turn to silver light, his body dissolving into the Milky Way, each feather becoming a star. Pegasus neighed a sound no longer of the earth, but of the sky itself, a song of wind and light. It was not a cry of pain, but a farewell to freedom, a final hymn between a creature and the world that once held it. Below, Bellerophon, the man who had lost everything, still lifted his gaze to the heavens, and as night descended, he saw a new star burning bright in the west. Its shape was familiar, wings outstretched, head held high. "Pegasus," he whispered, eyes glistening, "you're still flying." In the starlight, he heard a distant neigh echo back. Perhaps no one else could hear it, but to him it was forgiveness, a final greeting from a loyal friend. Zeus watched as the horse became a constellation, then turned to Athena. "You see," he said, "man may fall, but what they create, loyalty, hope, freedom, will never die. Pegasus is proof of that. Athena smiled sadly. Mortals will tell this story for thousands of years, she said. But they'll forget one thing, that even gods can learn from the mistakes of men. Zeus nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon, where the Pegasus constellation began to glow. And that, he said softly, is why I do not extinguish that fire, because the sky will always need those who dare to fly. From that night on, every autumn, the Pegasus constellation appeared, its wings stretching wide as if embracing the Milky Way itself. Philosophers called it the symbol of freedom, poets the soul of aspiration, and soldiers, before every battle, looked up and whispered, "Fly high, but never forget the ground." Children told stories of Pegasus around their fires, and the old pointed to the heavens and said, "That's the horse of the gods, but also the dream of mankind." And on those clear, quiet nights, if you look closely, you might see one star flicker brighter than the rest, like the eye of a horse looking down, reminding you that freedom is never a sin, only blind pride makes us fall. Pegasus is immortal now, not upon a throne, but among the stars, where all dreams begin. In every gust of wind, every crashing wave, every pair of wings that dares to rise, one can still feel the spirit of that divine horse, forever, the emblem of what not even the gods could bind, freedom. Across the Greek sky, as the constellation of Pegasus blazed brightly against the night, the winds from Mount Olympus drifted down like whispers of the gods retelling an ancient tale to mankind. There, the story of Bellerophon had become legend, no longer a tragedy, but a reminder etched deep into the memory of humankind. The night winds carried echoes of the past, telling of the hero who once rode Pegasus through fire, thunder, and fate itself only to fall, not by the hand of any god, but by the weight of his own pride. As time went on, people forgot the names of kings, but Bellerophon's name endured in song not as a failure, but as the one who reached the final limit of what it means to be human. On the hill where he once fell, the grass grew green again, and the wind whispered softly, like gentle repentance. A young traveller passing through that land once stopped, gazed up at the starry night, and asked an old man of the village, "Grandfather, why is that star the brightest?" The old man looked up, his eyes holding centuries of memory. "That is Pegasus," he said, "the horse of the gods, the symbol of freedom. And there," he pointed to a dim patch of sky where no stars shone, "is where the one who rode him fell." The boy was silent, then asked, "Was he wrong for wanting to fly to the heavens?" The old man smiled faintly, his voice raspy but warm. "Right or wrong doesn't lie in the wings, but in the heart. A man may ride the wind, but he cannot ride his own pride." That saying spread across the Mediterranean, written into epics, sung by Greek poets during wine-soaked nights, where firelight danced upon the faces of those who still dreamed of flight. They sang, "As long as man can dream, the sky will have room for light. But when man believes he is the light, darkness will come." In temples, paintings of Bellerophon riding Pegasus no longer depicted glory, but a beauty tinged with sorrow, the hero flying through lightning, the sun blazing behind him, and below, the earth waiting with open arms of destiny. Later philosophers used the story to teach their students about the limits of power and the depths of the human heart. To know who you are, they said, is what separates a hero from a rebel. Bellerophon did not fail because he was weak, but because he forgot what made him strong: humility. On Olympus, some nights, Athena would still sit upon her clouded balcony, gazing down at the world where oil lamps flickered in the dark. "Mankind never stops trying to fly," she murmured, "and I only hope they don't forget Bellerophon's lesson." Zeus, from his throne, nodded softly. "I punished him," he said, "but through him, all of mankind learned what even gods could never teach with words." Hera smiled faintly, her voice like a breeze. "Strange, isn't it, how sometimes the ones who fall are the very ones who make humanity stand tall?" Below, as the winds returned, the Greeks told the tale again by firelight of the man who dared to fly, the horse who embodied freedom, and the lesson that never grows old. "When you see Pegasus," they said, "remember freedom is the wing, but pride is the stone. If you fly carrying the stone, you will fall." And so, across millennia, the legend lived on, not because it spoke of gods or battles, but because it spoke of humanity itself, of the yearning to rise, and the limits we can never escape. On the clearest nights, people say you can still hear Pegasus's distant neigh in the wind, the sound of freedom and of warning. And somewhere, in some quiet corner of eternity, perhaps the soul of Bellerophon still sits, gazing up at the sky, smiling as he sees his old friend shine. He no longer regrets, for now he understands. One does not fly to surpass the gods, but to find the best within themselves. The legend ends there, not with thunder, not with fire, but with the whisper of the wind, carried through generations, through stories, through the dreams of those who long to soar. A man may ride the wind, but he cannot ride his own pride. If you're still here, it means your heart is beating in rhythm with the stories of the night. Hit subscribe to join me on the next journey where every shadow hides a secret waiting to be awakened. And now, turn down the lights, relax your mind, and let sleep carry you away. Sleep well for tonight. The world is still whispering,